Committee. We are joined by the laggards from ECM today, Delegates Crosby, Jackson, and Adam. Now, I'm just joking. They're awesome humans. So, in any case, let me just tell you the order of the bills, and it is this. The first three bills we're doing are the ones that we are hearing jointly with ECM. So, 1134, Delegate Acevero, 840, Delegate Boyce, and 1100, Delegate Jacobs. Then we go to, then they will scurry off to their committee. We will then do House Bill 1209, Delegate Lehman, pardon me, House Bill 1004, Wacomico County, House Bill 1087, Wacomico County, House Bill 1003, also Wacomico County, they're busy down there, House Bill 1005, Howard County, House Bill 1139, Delegate Boyce, House Bill 1119, Dorchester County, and we will end the evening with House Bill 1140, Delegate Riley. We have 70-some witnesses, so make sure your questions and answers are punchy. And with that, let me welcome up to the front Delegate Gabe Acevero. All right, there you are.
Front and center.
Yes, you are. Welcome to the committee, sir. You have 4 minutes, and if you want to call up your panel.
Appreciate it.
All right, Gabe, have you been in this committee before?
This is my first time in Environment and Transportation, Mr. Chair. I put in a whole bill.
Then we will be especially abusive.
All right. I put in a whole bill just to come see you all.
Oh, okay.
You know, didn't have to, but I said, you know what?
No, I can feel.
I need to.
I can feel the love already.
Appreciate that, Mr. Chair. And for the record, Delegate Gabriel Acevero, here to testify in support of House Bill 1134. For folks who, have been following when we talk about climate change, particularly for coastal states such as Maryland, and even for our state capital, Annapolis, we understand the devastating impact that climate change can not just have on our communities, but really it's a call to action to ensure that we're taking any and all necessary policy steps to ensure that we're doing what we can to move away from fossil fuels, to ensure that we're lowering our emissions, and we're really leaving a state and a planet that is more sustainable than we found it, and certainly for the next generation. And it is with that that I introduced House Bill 1134, the Maryland All-Electric Building Act, which requires newly constructed buildings, with some exceptions, to meet energy demands without the use of fossil fuel. The circumstances that really inspired this bill, has a lot to do with some of the reports that we're seeing about climate change, but also the fact that the Environmental Protection Agency has noted that Maryland's fishing and agriculture sectors may suffer as a result of climate change. We see, whether it's the Chesapeake Bay or whether it's the change in climate and the impacts that it has had on all of our community, that we desperately need to take action. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has urged governments to ramp up action to curb emission, with the new Secretary of General writing that high-emitting governments and corporations, to include buildings, are not just turning a blind eye, but not taking the necessary action to make sure that they meet climate standards as well as climate goals. Scientists have warned that we are essentially close to the tipping point when it comes to our environment and climate change. And what this bill's intent, what the intent of this bill is to do is to ensure that the Department of Labor would move in to adopt these new provisions as part of the Maryland Building Performance Standards, that some modified regulations of the International Building Code and the International Energy Conservation Code, but also allows for the modifications and the regulations that the Department of Labor, would be responsible for, that they not only see through, but but it does not diminish the availability of affordable housing or the affordability of electricity for customers in all electric buildings. House Bill 1134 is designed to ensure that Maryland meets those standards, that we're doing every and all that we can to reduce our emissions and to move away from fossil fuels. As I mentioned earlier, as a coastal state, we're in Annapolis right now, a coastal city that would be on the forefront of the climate crisis if we do not take action. And so it is with this that I submit this bill and ask for a favorable report. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and I appreciate the members of my panel who are here today not just to speak in support of this bill, but to answer any questions that the committee may have. With that, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Terrific. We'll hear from your witnesses, and then we'll proceed to questions. So who would like to go first or next?
Good afternoon.
Stacey.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Barvet and distinguished committee members. For the record, my name is Stacey Hartwell. I am the chair of the NAACP Maryland State Conference Environmental and Climate Justice Committee. I'm here on behalf of the conference in support of House Bill 1134. This legislation is a meaningful step toward addressing an insidious and entrenched form of systemic racism, and that's the use of fossil fuel energy. Climate harms such as increased flooding and excessive heat are concentrated in vulnerable communities, leaving Black and brown people to experience these impacts most potently and leaving us with the least ability to adjust to these deadly conditions. All electric buildings produce zero direct emissions and zero indirect emissions when electricity is produced from zero emission sources. With intentional design and analysis, building electrification can also increase efficiency, cut costs, improve air quality, and greatly enhance safety. In the United States, commercial and residential buildings account for more energy consumption, 40%, and greenhouse gas emissions, 31%, than any other sector of the economy. Specifically, on-site combustion of fossil fuels in buildings contributes to 13% of the U.S. emissions. We at the NAACP firmly support this legislation because of its momentum towards ridding the state of dirty fossil fuel energy. You know, we boldly passed legislation called Climate Solutions Now, not Climate Solutions Later. We must transition from the status quo now. House Bill 1134 will help ensure we meet our goal of reducing GHG emissions beginning now. For these reasons, again, with the nod to the Justice 40 initiative, we request a favorable report on House Bill 1134. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the committee members. My name is Patrick Bigger. I'm the research director at the Climate and Community Project and a resident of Frederick County. I'm very happy to speak today in support of the Maryland All-Electric Building Act. Accelerating the transition to all-electric buildings is a critical step towards achieving Maryland's greenhouse gas reduction goals and ensures that new buildings and homes in Maryland are safe, affordable, and comfortable. According to the Maryland Commission on Climate Change, buildings constituted 18% of our greenhouse gas emissions in 2017, and emissions from buildings are projected to be the second largest source of climate pollution over the next 10 years. Restricting gas infrastructure in new buildings is critical because building energy systems are designed to operate for decades. When new buildings come with gas as one of their energy systems, it either locks in fossil fuels far into the future or pushes building owners to retrofit at additional costs. This bill will help developers, homeowners, and businesses make smart long-term choices and contribute to meeting Maryland's climate commitments. In addition to reducing climate pollution, the bill will make families safer. One recent study found that almost 13% of childhood asthma in the U.S. is attributable to gas stove use. This risk is especially worrisome for tenants who rarely have a say in how their appliances are powered. Gas infrastructure is also prone to explosion and leaks that harm Marylanders, and these harms are not evenly distributed. A 2022 study of cities across the country found that cities with a higher density of communities of color had much higher exposure to gas leaks. This bill, along with others for building retrofits, will put Maryland on a safer path, or a path to a safer future, all while driving statewide transition to cleaner energy. Electrifying buildings is easier than ever before. The Federal Inflation Reduction Act includes many incentives for building electrification, including in new builds. Other states, including California, have already taken this step, and cities like New York, DC, and Montgomery County here in Maryland have as well. I hope you'll advance this bill and make the entire state of Maryland join that join the forefront of the movement.
All righty then, thank you very much. Any questions for the sponsor or his witnesses? Well, apparently you did a very good job of explaining yourselves. What? Oh, yeah. That's the oldest hazing ritual.
You can start here and
Vice
go around the
Chairman-
horseshoe.
The Vice Chairman has a question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Delegate. Thank you for bringing this bill. Last year, as part of the Climate Solutions Now Act, we charged the Building Codes Administration with looking at the issue of an all-electric building code and reporting back to the Legislative Policy Committee, let's see, by end of this year on its findings and recommendations. So I guess my question to you is, why should we jump ahead of that study and, mandate it through legislation now?
Yeah, appreciate the question, Delegate. I think, as was rightly pointed out, I think given the changes in our climate, I think the fact that we are a coastal state, I think, we should certainly be a little bit more aggressive in the way that we pursue some of these policies. We did pass very meaningful legislation last session and before related to our environment and environmental justice. This sort of represents that unfinished work, and, we certainly hope to work with whomever to ensure that we can get there. I'll also point out that the Maryland Department of Environment is certainly supportive of this bill. And the goal, again, it's just to recognize that, when we talk about our climate, when we talk about ourselves as a coastal state and in a city that is a coastal city, I just think that, we need to be a little bit more aggressive. My generation is what you would describe as an impatient optimist. We recognize that, things will get better, but we're a little bit impatient about how soon and how far that we go to get there, and this bill sort of represents that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the sponsor or his witnesses? Seeing none, thank you very much, sir. Let me proceed to the opponents of the bill. And I'm going to read these off in the order in which they were signed up. David Wright, John Quinn, and Robert Parlett. Why don't you come up and say your name for the record, and then proceed. You have each of you has 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee, I'm John Quinn here for Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. Here at my request is Mark Case, who leads our strategy and regulatory group, to present our testimony. Mr. Case.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for the opportunity to provide comments today. Respectfully, BGE opposes House Bill 1134 for reasons that I'll describe in just a moment. But let me begin by expressing BGE's strong support and commitment to Maryland's goals to reach net zero emissions by 2045. We launched our own initiative 2 years ago, Path to Clean, to reach net zero emissions from our operations. We also support a wide variety of customer programs to help reduce emissions, including energy efficiency, demand response, building electrification, transportation electrification, moving our gas system to cleaner fuels, and many other strategies to help achieve those goals. BGE has a long history and a successful track record of helping our customers lower their energy usage. We've seen, for example, a 20% reduction in the average electric usage since Empower Maryland began. So our concerns with House Bill 1134 are several. First, we need time to allow several studies and recommendations to play out. There are a multitude of working groups focused on these issues that will be issuing reports in the near future. For example, the CS&A bill requires the Maryland Commission to complete a study by the end of the year about the readiness of the grid. Secondly, we know that moving buildings and vehicles to electric will put heavy demands on the system, approximately a tripling of peak demand and many new substations and feeders that will be required. And finally, the bill lacks some of the tools that we think are needed to support this transition. Thank you.
Who'd like to go next? Yes, go ahead, sir.
All right, my name is Bobby Parlett. I'm with the Birch Oil Company. I've also worked in the heating oil industry since 1978. I'm a board member with NORA, the National Oil Heat Research Alliance. Home heating fuels, home heating oil in particular, is in a transition to biofuels. Biofuel can be grown in the fields from Maryland in the form of soybeans, and we could refine these products and turn them into renewable heating oil called biofuel, and still provide food for the food sector. This fuel has the potential to create thousands of green new jobs for Maryland. Currently, heating oil delivered in New England is 20% renewable, which means that it's got 20% biofuel and 80% fossil fuel. NORA is working with a company in Connecticut that has 8,000 homes doing a field study with 50% bio and 50% fossil fuel. And we have homes in Seattle and upstate New York that are working right now with 100% biofuel. The standards are being finalized, and the burner manufacturers are getting UL testing on these appliances to be able to go into either a new application or a retrofit application. If this bill moves forward as written, we won't be able to make those green investments in our energy moving forward. And the reality of that is no one wants to put money into a sinking ship. The ban on biofuels or the ban on fossil fuels would not allow us to transition into the environmentally friendly fuel that we'd like. The Inflation Reduction Act set aside hundreds of millions of dollars for biorefineries. We should construct a biorefinery in Maryland, but that won't happen if this passes. HB 1134 encourages 100% electrification. Why? Why has biofuel not been investigated as part of the solution? Would you want to bring thousands of green new jobs to the state of Maryland and growing crops in the fields and transporting of this renewable energy? Why couldn't a biorefinery be constructed? I respectfully I'm opposed to this bill.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all the opponents, and then we'll go to questions, so don't run away. Mike O'Halloran, Scott Taylor, Sarah Price, and Tom Ballantyne.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Out of respect for time, I'll just go ahead and get started right away. For the record, my name is Mike O'Halloran here today on behalf of the Mid-Atlantic Petroleum Distributors Association. And Mr. Vice Chairman, as you pointed out, the legislature last year tackled this particular issue in a lot of different ways. And as it did that, I think there was a tacit acknowledgement that a sole source energy policy, which is to say electrification, particularly in our built sector, poses a lot of unknowns and a lot of challenges and a lot of problems. And as you heard from our previous panelist, Mr. Parlett from Birch Oil, is our industries are poised to meet those challenges. And we have been for quite some time. So I think, it could be boiled down to, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. As we are, looking to these new industries and looking to improve our own industries, whether it's the fuel distributors themselves, the manufacturers. You heard Mr. Parlett talk about burner manufacturers, making sure that they can still utilize B50 or even up to B100 products. I think there's a great opportunity to partner with our industries. So for that reason, we do oppose House Bill 1134 and respectfully request an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Okay, who'd like to go next? Go
Scott
ahead.
Taylor here.
Give us your name.
Sure, Scott Taylor. I'm in opposition of HB 1134. I'm a third-generation member of Taylor Gas Company located in St. Mary's County. Taylor Gas is a small propane and HVAC marketer. It was founded in 1950 by my grandparents. We operate a very versatile business. Not only do we provide clean, safe, and abundant energy, but we provide a reliable and trustworthy fuel that does it all. When a military installation needed an effective and robust solution to feed a large number of its members, they turned to propane. When the Navy considered energy redundancy in emergency situations, they turned to propane because propane was the answer. When the health department was worried about electrical interruptions at a COVID testing facility, they turned to propane. Propane provides the definitive solution for consumers interested in the best attributes of any energy source. One of our customers shared that when they installed solar at their home, the solar company recommended they keep propane for space heating. Even the solar companies recognize that efficiency and reliability of propane cannot be matched. In our community, we have one cable company. To be frank, their service is unreliable. They don't deliver what they promise, and consumers have no choice. One-star reviews don't make any impact when you're the only game in town. I can't help but see the similarities with the Electrify Everything movement. If you please turn your attention to, I did upload a PDF. It was from our local co-op, SMECO. It was sent to all consumers or customers on Christmas Eve, and it requests customers conserve their electrical use due to the cold weather. If the grid can't handle Christmas lights and cold weather, how will it handle sole source energy for an entire community? It's apparent that eliminating alternatives for consumers is not a reliable and safe solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who'd like to be next?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Tom Ballantyne on behalf of NIOP Maryland. We're a commercial real estate trade association here recommending your unfavorable report on House Bill 1134. Our organization supports the adoption of least cost decarbonization strategies that are technically feasible, commercially available, cost effective, and can result in an orderly and managed energy transition for buildings and their occupants. We have concerns about this bill. It seems loosely based on a New York City law, but it's missing some important elements. New York City ordered a study of the use of heat pump technologies in large buildings. That study is due to be completed in June of this year. The New York bill also sets a different adoption schedule for water heating systems in multifamily buildings, an acknowledgement that there are limited all-electric equipment options that can meet efficiency, health, comfort needs of large multifamily buildings. The Climate Solutions Now Act requires all the specific reports that you know about. Purpose of that was to provide the information necessary to create a framework and a transition that makes sense for Maryland. This jumps the calendar on all of those activities. We're concerned about decoupling from the national building codes and writing a code that may require designers to use untested technologies and techniques. And the waiver qualification in this bill requires a redundant second system of electric mechanicals that really isn't an option, and it's something that you removed from the Climate Solutions Act bill last year. So for those reasons, we'd recommend your unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Sarah, I believe you're the final witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, honorable members of the committee. My name is Sarah Price, here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association in respectful opposition to this proposal. As has already been noted, this legislature did a lot of work last year on the Climate Solutions Now Act, and this proposal goes far beyond last year's carefully crafted legislation. Our concerns are about the effect on cost and availability of energy should this go into effect. We've all heard about the impacts on the power grid in Texas and California when the need for power is not able to be met by the power grid. And we've just heard an example of concerns about power grids here in Maryland. We worry that should this go into effect without careful study of our own infrastructure here in the state, we don't know if energy would be available to meet the needs of all of our communities statewide. I agree that last year's legislation does sort of set the stage or open the door for accompanying policies to move the state further along in addressing climate change, but it's barely been a year. So we would urge the legislature to take a close look at our infrastructure and our state's capabilities and maybe make improvements where necessary before we put any new policies in place. Thank you.
Questions? I feel it necessary to say for the record that the failure of the grid in Texas was due to the failure to weatherize the natural gas assets. According to the managers of the ERCOT system, it had nothing to do with solar or wind. I feel the need to say that for the record. There appear to be no further questions or comments. Thank you, one and all. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 1134. Thank you, Delegate Acevero. Let's go to Oh, quite a few pages of, all right, here we go. All right, Delegate 840, House Bill 840, Delegate Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I bring up my panel?
Oh, please do.
A full disclosure, Mr. Chair and colleagues, I have a bill, I am first on the judiciary bill hearing, so if I disappear, I have not, yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you, and good afternoon, Chair Stein, and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Regina T. Boyce, here to present HB 840, Climate, Labor, and Environmental Equity Act of 2023. This bill is an updated and clarified version of last year's bill, HB 880. The goal of HB 840 is to advance environmental equity, improve health outcomes, and reduce and remove environmental injustices caused by past and current permitting decisions to underserved and overburdened communities. The bill's stated goals will be accomplished by requiring the Maryland Department of the Environment to closely review its processes and approvals of 1-601 permits by using the required environmental justice screenings tool, an EJ score, to determine the potential environmental impacts of a permit and conducting a climate environmental equity evaluation report. If the score determines that the permit may impact overburdened and underserved communities. Should the EJ score determine that there may be an environmental impact, the Climate Environmental Equity Evaluation will provide an analysis of up to 8 data sets, including methods of mitigation to fully determine whether MDE should deny, alter, or amend the conditions of the pending permit. To strengthen transparency and notification of this process, MDE will be required to provide an opt-in option utilizing text, phone, email, or regular mail to residents in the affected area or in an area adjacent to the resident's census tract of a pending or an approved permit application. Maryland communities continue to be challenged with environmental impacts based on decisions we have made as a state decades ago. Those decisions that we did not fully evaluate beforehand because in some cases we did not know to evaluate. However, we can change the trajectory of how we make these often irreversible decisions by performing more of a thorough analysis on the front end of the process, saving time, money, and detrimental damage to our most vulnerable communities. HB 840 is necessary. It's a necessary first step to begin ending negative environmental and health impacts. Thank you for your time and your consideration. I urge a favorable report. And while I have a couple of more minutes, I do want to say that I've been working closely with MDE, so they will be offering amendments, which I certainly support. And I also want to, for the opponents, to just mention that this bill really focuses on a certain community under certain permits, under certain conditions. And so to say that is that this bill is not intended and is not we're not looking to hinder the permit process. And so you'll hear some of that testimony and that this may allow the department to maybe outside of their own policies decide that they want to hold a permit for way too long, understanding that the permit process, as long as it is, could be 6 months to a year. This process, vetting process, is not meant to do that and will not, while it touches all 1-601 permits, given that it is triggered by an EJ score, that it would not really speak to most permits. And so with that, I again urge a favorable report.
Thank you, Delegate. Who'd like to go next?
Sure. Vice Chair Stein, members of the committee, my name is Caitlin Schmidt, and I'm a senior policy analyst at the Center for Progressive Reform, here in support of House Bill 840. The Center for Progressive Reform is a research and advocacy organization made up of member scholars who conduct independent research and policy analysis to advocate for effective collective solutions to our most pressing issues. I want to thank Delegate Boyce for her continued leadership to promote environmental justice and equity in Maryland, and I'm happy to be here today in support of the bill. I'd like to point out that our written testimony is co-signed by 24 other environmental and public health and community organizations, and we strongly support House Bill 840 because it is intended to enable MDE to review the real-world potential impacts that polluters may have on Marylanders. The permits covered in this bill include air and water pollution permits for most industrial facilities and construction activities greater than 1 acre. Unlike industrial facilities, it has not been demonstrated that the construction of new housing developments will cause or has caused disparate environmental and public health impacts on overburdened or underserved communities in Maryland, because the main pollutant of concern when it comes to residential housing development, as we all know, is sedimentation or dirt. While sedimentation is a major concern for the health of local waterways and aquatic species, the climate and environmental equity analysis encouraged under this bill is aimed at public and social health stressors that are just simply not associated with sedimentation or dirt. So at least 11 other states consider the social and economic impacts of environmental projects at the permitting level or address environmental justice head-on. So to ensure that all Marylanders have fair opportunities when it comes to their jobs, their health, and their lives, we urge a favorable support on House Bill 840.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Jose Coronado Flores. I'm a research and policy analyst with the organization CASA, the largest immigrant advocacy and service organization in Maryland. We're here in support of this bill because many of our members live in some of the most polluted communities in Maryland. I want to share with you two specific communities. The first one is East Riverdale in Maryland, Prince George's County. This community is a low-income immigrant community, high-density apartment complexes all over, and with the environmental justice score, which is out of 1, this community has a 0.91 exposure coefficient. This is a community that I have also called home, and the level of pollution is immense. It's right next to Bladensburg Industrial Park. Another community that I want to point to is census tract just north of Langley Park in Silver Spring. This community has an exposure score of 0.96. Another example of a low-income immigrant community with an immense amount of daily exposure. Our communities are at risk. People living in highly polluted areas should not have to worry about more polluting businesses opening up. And this bill right here would help address that and give them some sort of defense for these businesses opening up. This is essential for our community's health, and with that, I urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Rebecca Rear, and I'm the Director of Climate Policy and Justice with the Maryland League of Conservation Voters. Maryland LCV supports HB 840, the Climate, Labor, and Environmental Equity Act of 2023, and we thank Delegate Boyce for sponsoring this important bill. Maryland LCV is committed to addressing environmental injustices in the state. HB 840 does this by taking a more comprehensive look at the way facilities are permitted to try to ensure there is not undue burden or harm from that facility. I'm also a member of the Maryland Public Health Association and would like to express their support for the bill. You can find their testimony in the bill file. And actually, health is a really good way to think about this bill. You can think about the Climate, Labor, and Environmental Equity Act sort of like a checkup with your primary care physician. As the saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. When we see our physician, they often ask us about our health status and any underlying conditions. These questions are to inform the next course of action. This is what HB 840 does. A government agency would be gaining information about any pre-existing conditions in a community to make sure that the course of action they're considering is appropriate. When we make sure underserved communities are not also overburdened by pollution, we are working to prevent environmental degradation and public health harms to those communities. This approach will save us in long-term costs associated with health harms and environmental degradation and benefit the economy overall by providing safer jobs and communities. The same way we save by paying for a preventive care checkup rather than years of treatment after getting sick. We appreciate your time today and urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon again, distinguished committee members. For the record, my name is Stacy Hartwell. I'm the chair of the NAACP Maryland State Conference Environmental and Climate Justice Committee. We support House Bill 0840, which requires Maryland policymakers to evaluate the climate equity implications of proposed policy changes. One of our committee's primary goals is to advocate for increasing the livability of communities while also strengthening their resilience. House Bill 0840 will be a powerful tool for achieving exactly that. It will also serve as a cornerstone for implementing policy for the Climate Solutions Now Act. This legislation is a meaningful step toward addressing one of the most insidious and entrenched forms of systemic racism, again, the use of fossil fuels. Across Maryland, BIPOC communities disproportionately suffer from pollutants and other environmental harm, poisoned by their own air, soil, and water. In Baltimore, a city that is 65% Black, as many as 130 residents per 100,000 die every year from the consequences of air pollution alone. Despite this, renewable energy company, Energy Answers, is attempting to build a garbage incinerator that would emit 1,000 pounds of lead and 250 pounds of mercury into the air of the Curtis Bay neighborhood, which remains largely segregated. This legislation would prevent us from adding insult to injury. Baltimore is not only the place that is harmed, however, across Maryland, communities adjacent to industrial sites, such as Lothian and Arundel County, are turned into sacrifice zones, places with severe and potentially irreversible pollution and even greater. Negative health impacts, in Lothian, which is disproportionately Black and poor, mining sites fill the air with diesel exhaust and dust while toxic cadmium leaches into the soil. To help make the Justice 40 initiative a reality and to achieve the goals outlined in the Climate Solutions Now Act, we request a favorable report. Thank you.
That's it for the panel. Oh, Patricia, yes.
I will be providing translation for Patricia.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Patricia de León. Soy residente de la ciudad de Baltimore desde hace 24 años y con mucho esfuerzo y arduo trabajo logré ahorrar para comprar nuestra casita en la zona de Brooklyn, Maryland, y así logrando alcanzar nuestro primer sueño americano.
Good afternoon. My name is Patricia de Leon. I have been a resident of Baltimore City for 24 years. After a struggle and hard work, my family and I were able to buy a home in the Brooklyn neighborhood and realize our American dream.
Antes de mudarme a Brooklyn, yo era una persona sana sin ninguna complicación de salud, pero hace 4 años fui diagnosticada con asma y desde entonces tengo que estar poniéndome la máquina de albuterol para controlar el asma. Yo no entendía por qué tenía asma si nunca había tenido problemas anteriormente. En el momento de comprar la casa no sabía qué tan alto nivel de contaminación tenía el área de Brooklyn.
Prior to moving to Brooklyn in Baltimore, I was a person with perfect health. But 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with asthma, and I constantly have to use my inhaler due to breathing issues. When I bought my home, I had no idea the amount of air pollution that was in my neighborhood.
Como madre de 3 hijos, me preocupa por la salud y la seguridad de mi vecindario. Me preocupa la calidad de nuestro medio ambiente y cómo ha impactado la salud mía y temo por la de mi familia también.
As a mother of 3 kids and a proud community member, I sincerely am concerned about the health of my community. I have had negative health outcomes, and I fear that the same will happen to more people in my community and my kids.
Según la base de datos ambiental de Maryland, mi vecindario tiene una puntuación muy alta del 95 de exposición ambiental, es decir, una de las puntuaciones más altas de Maryland, expuesto a un ambiente tóxico. Y esto se manifiesta en que los residentes de mi vecindario son más probables para desarrollar enfermedades crónicas respiratorias. Esas puntuaciones son más que números, son las vidas de nuestros seres queridos y personas como yo. Hay muchas ya manifestándose del mismo problema de salud, personas de mi misma área.
This will be the last part, okay, because you've already passed the time, right?
So for translation, we usually have additional time. I thought the clock would be paused when
Okay.
when
All right, then,
translation
we'll
was
just,
happening.
we'll just do
Sorry
what we
about
need to
that.
do. That's fine. We'll just continue. Go ahead.
Thank you, appreciate that. But continuing, according to Maryland Environmental Database, my neighborhood has a 0.95 out of 1 environmental exposure score. That is to say, one of the highest in the state. My neighborhood is full of toxic chemicals in the air, and many people around me have developed respiratory issues. This is not just a number. This is the lives of people I love and my community.
Por eso levanto mi voz hoy para pedir su voto a favor de esta ley. Las comunidades que han tenido que soportar las consecuencias de un ambiente tóxico deberían tener el poder de limitar nuestras exposiciones a industrias contaminantes. Nuestras comunidades no deben seguir siendo sacrificadas para que industrias contaminantes puedan hacer su negocio sin tomar la salud de nosotros y de nuestra familia en cuenta. Nuestro derecho a la vida y a un ambiente saludable vale más que dejar los negocios operar donde sea. Comunidades como la mía necesitamos justicia climática ahora. Gracias por oír mi testimonio.
With that said, thank you for hearing my testimony, and that's why I'm here in support of this bill. Communities like mine have experienced the consequences of negative toxic chemicals in the air, and these industries have almost no regard to where they're being placed. A bill like this will help prevent them from opening up in communities like my own. Today I'm here asking for climate justice for communities like mine now. Thank you for having my testimony. She was supposed to, but she's in the hospital, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for this bill and, important protections for environmental justice communities. This does not apply to all development, right? It's only those that receive an EJ score, as we've already defined.
Right, so it's just the 1-601 permits. And to your point, yes, it has to be triggered by an environmental justice score, a high environmental justice score that would then go through an evaluation period and then be, again, based on that evaluation, it will be approved, it will be altered, amended, or denied.
Thank you. And I wondered if you wanted to respond to some of the comments made by some of the opponents that this would actually harm environmental justice communities by preventing redevelopment.
I somewhat take exception to those comments. This is not, again, meant to stop any projects. I know we've had those conversations in this committee before about certain requirements in the legislation we put in that kind of stops whether it's affordable housing or this is not that intent at all. And if it is, if there's language that needs to clarify to say so, I'm happy to work with any opponents to do so. But that's not the intention at all, and I don't think that's likely. But if Caitlin wants to, yeah.
I'd just like to chime in. On page five, you can see the factors that we're asking MDE to use in this climate and equity evaluation. As I mentioned in my testimony, sedimentation is the primary concern with residential development, and there has not been a history of sedimentation causing environmental justice concerns in Maryland. We're really concerned about industry that manage, stores, or manufactures chemicals that end up in our air, our land, and our water.
Thank you.
Your microphone, Madam Chair.
It's been a while. Are there any other questions for any members of the committee, for the sponsor, or for any of the proponents? If not, we will move on to the favorable with amendments. Devin Dodson.
Wow, it's been a while. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. I am Devin Dodson. I'm Assistant Secretary at the Maryland Department of the Environment. We strongly support with amendments House Bill 840. Our new Secretary, Secretary McElwain, sat before you about 3 weeks or so ago, a month ago, and expressed to you that her #1 priority was environmental justice and making sure that all communities are lifted up. This bill does that with a small amendment that we have placed into our written testimony to strike the labor provisions associated with the bill because it doesn't really affect, it's not something that MDE can do. However, everything that you've heard the advocates and the sponsor state are understood and appreciated by the Maryland Department of the Environment, and we're looking forward to the passage and implementation of this bill. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for this witness? I see none, therefore, you're free to go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to see you.
Good to see you again, too. We'll go to the opponents now. Robert Enton, Lori Graff, Tom Ballantyne.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Lori Graff, CEO of Maryland Building Industry Association, and I appreciate the conversation and certainly would love to sit down with the sponsor to discuss amendments. We just have some concerns, obviously, about how this will affect housing and the ability to build housing, the timelines, those types of things that were already addressed. I did want to also just bring your attention to something you have heard a lot about in this committee, Senate Bill 528, the Climate Solutions Now Act. It does call for MDE to coordinate with the already existing Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities, which exists in the Department of Planning. And the bill calls for them to assess the impact of climate change in overburdened and underserved communities, which is already defined in that act, as well as assuring that appropriate percentage of state climate change funds are spent on these communities. And their report is due at the end of this year, and it has a whole bunch of things in what they're supposed to do as far as adopting a methodology for identifying communities that are affected and some other things. So we would just ask, let's look at this, let's play that out a little bit and see what happens. But we are worried about the unintended consequences about redevelopment and what the effect would be on housing. So, but we'd be happy to talk about amendments that would make it make sense. Thank you.
Great, and let's see. Oh, all right, we'll go to questions. Questions?
No, wait, they haven't.
Oh, Bob hasn't gone yet?
No, sorry.
Or Tom?
Neither have I.
Okay, okay. Go ahead.
With your
Sorry.
permission, Mr. Chairman, I'll continue.
Of course.
Tom Ballantyne with NIOP Maryland. We appreciate the goals of the bill. Our concerns are about the scope. And I heard some things in the sponsor panel that were encouraging, but we need permits for kind of general redevelopment projects that are under the title that's called out in the bill. Relatively minor permits for stormwater or air emissions permits for things like restaurant grills or dry cleaners. And the bill, the way we read it, sets an EJ score based on geography, not so much on the intensity of the permit, and doesn't really tailor it. It does apply to very intense kinds of activities, but we don't think it differentiates very well. And if there's an opportunity to address that through amendment, we would be happy to talk about that and be interested in trying to resolve it. On balance, we think that our activities can be a catalyst for positive change in the neighborhoods that need more investment. And we'd like to just point out that the way the bill is structured, the requirements for the testing would be a disincentive to investing in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Robert Etten on behalf of the Maryland Building Industry Association. I'm tempted to say me too, but that would be not the normal thing for me. So I would like to just point to the fiscal note. The fiscal note has 2 pages which describe the current rules regarding this issue. And looking at the page 6 or the fiscal note, where it states that given the comprehensive nature of the climate and environmental equity evaluation established by the bill, and the fact that MDE may deny or alter a decision or amend the conditions under a pending permit based on its findings under the bill, for any permit application that triggers the evaluation requirement, regardless of the nature of the permit, there could be potentially significant delays and increased costs. And I think we do need to kind of strike a balance and have a more kind of detailed standard for this type of process. You know, we're about affordable housing. We're not installing incinerators or anything like that. We're about affordable housing, trying to make affordable housing in neighborhoods that are underserved. And I think we just need to strike a balance between looking at this and making sure that we're not negatively impacting affordable housing in the neighborhoods that need it so badly. So we'd be happy to work on this. I had a brief conversation with the sponsor earlier today, and she indicated a willingness to sit down and work with us on amendments. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now that I have allowed all of you to speak, forgive me for my mistake, we'll go to questions. First goes to Delegate Ruth. Any of you guys?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I'm looking at the bill here, and it says permit means a permit listed under section 1-601A of this title. And looking at this list, this doesn't really seem to apply to like commercial or residential development. These all look like very, so it's air quality control permits, permits to install, alter, materially extend landfill systems, incinerators, discharging pollutants, structure used for storage or distribution of sewage sludge, hazardous substance facility, hazardous materials facility, low-level nuclear waste facility. Am I misunderstanding what the, permits required here are?
A3 is a permit to discharge pollutants to waters of the state. That's a stormwater permit, either an individual permit for development or the general permit for construction or other activities that are issued by the department. And there are minor air emissions permits, backup generators, and other kinds of commonly permitted items under the air provisions in the bill.
So I guess then you would be open to, you said you're open to discussing with the sponsor, you would be open to possibly amendments to exempt like minor, like you said, minor air quality things, where these major projects that have the potential to really impact the community would still be protected, require
Absolutely.
this evaluation.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for the opponents to the bill? Seeing none, thank you very much. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 840. Let's proceed then to House Bill 1100. Delegate Jacobs. Wow, a lot of... All right, Jay, you got your folks up there with you?
I've got a couple. I think there's one, you have the video?
Oh, yeah. Mr. Chairman, I'm getting like former Delegate Parrott up here, you know, with these videos.
Well, at least you're not like former Delegate Clarence Lamb and his 45-minute PowerPoints. So.
Now, this is my last bill of the session.
Okay.
So, this is, okay, let me just introduce the bill and then you hit the button. Thank you. So today, for the record, Delegate Jay Jacobs to present House Bill 1100, Battery Storage and Solar Arrays Safety Training Grant Program and Fund. And this bill really addresses some
developments in a battery.
Here it is, right here, the video.
You want me to show? I accidentally pressed start.
Well, so we're going to see a short video, and then I'll finish my testimony. Can you guys in the back see okay? I can see. Thank you. Go ahead.
At a West Valley APS facility, several firefighters hurt in this blast in April of last year. And tonight we're getting a better idea of exactly what went wrong there.
Yeah, in fact, ABC 15's Zach Crenshaw poring over a newly released report, and he joins us right now. Zach, with the key takeaways in all of this.
April 19th, 2019.
And that breaking news, just horrible. A massive lithium battery fire in Surprise.
8 firefighters injured. 2 from Peoria helicoptered to the ER that night.
Let me see. Move your hand. All right, I got some guys. We're going to kneel over here.
Now, a new 78-page report commissioned by APS reveals what happened.
Effectively, what you had was a defect in a battery cell.
Jacob Tetlow is Senior Vice President of Operations at APS. The report revealing the cause, a cascading thermal runaway.
So if you kind of think about it as just multiple batteries, in a sense, are so hot that they damage each other and just continue to produce more and more heat.
The investigation finding 3 hours after the heat started to build, Peoria firefighters opened the door. A spark occurred, and boom, that caused the explosion.
So we did the best we could. We had 2 hazmat teams on scene.
Julie Moore is a battalion chief with Surprise. She was on scene that night when 4 of her firefighters were also injured. None knew the risk the battery facility posed.
It's just very crucial for us to know what we're walking into in the beginning so that we can have a game plan already in place.
The report says better training is needed for first responders. And more importantly, APS and its manufacturers need better safety protocol.
There were multiple opportunities or barriers that could have been deployed to help mitigate this event.
It's unclear how much the explosion cost the company or how much APS may have paid out to the injured firefighters. One captain is still off the job nearly 18 months later. APS reached out to the injured men shortly after the explosion, and Tetlow says the company's committed to ensuring no one is injured again.
There's nothing more important than safety when we try to figure out how to make these properly work.
Now, APS has 2 other large battery storage facilities in Arizona, but since that explosion last April, they've taken both out of service until they say they can implement the report's recommendations and ensure safety. Meanwhile, Surprise Fire still conducting its investigation into this explosion. Live tonight, Zach Crenshaw, ABC 15, Arizona.
Thank you, Trish.
If you live...
All right, so this bill, after you watch the video, is obviously a safety bill on the permitting of these energy storing facilities that are tied to these solar arrays. And so the bill establishes a battery storage and solar array safety training grant program. That's what this bill is meant to do. As written, grants are provided to local governments to train local fire departments on the dangers and hazards of lithium-ion battery storage systems installed with solar arrays and how to respond to the emergencies involving such systems. To provide grants under the program, the bill establishes a battery storage and solar array safety training grant fund, which is funded at least in part through the receipt of at least $1 million from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, SEIF as we refer to it. There will be a clarifying amendment being offered to address some of the bill that is unclear in its meaning, such as the administration and training, which is typically done by MIFRE. I met with those officials actually this morning. It's been supported by the Fire and EMS Caucus, and a couple questions came up on Monday's meeting, and so we're trying to go address those issues so that everyone's is completely satisfied with the bill. There's a lot of concern, as you can see, for all the people that have given written testimony on this as well. So you can see the battery storage units are being permitted in areas around the state, and if a runaway thermal event occurs, to extinguish that fire can be very challenging, and our fire departments are certainly in need of proper training, which is, at this point it does not exist. So this program would be a grant-funded program that would establish that that educational program, and the grant funds would pay for it. And I have with me Commissioner Larry Porter and Kaylee Leager from Caroline County, and they are starting to get some of these battery storage facilities requested in an area that's tied to big solar array fields, and some of the other areas in my district as well. So I'm finished with my testimony at this point, and I would like to turn it over to them.
I'd like to go first. Go ahead.
Let me go first. Okay, good afternoon, Chairman Barbie and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. My name is Kaylee Leager, and I'm the Executive Assistant to the Caroline County Commissioners. Obviously, the Caroline County Commissioners support House Bill 1100. The Commissioners are extremely concerned with the safety of battery energy storage systems and lithium-ion batteries in use throughout the state. These systems can prove fatal due to the potential explosions, as you saw in the video previously, caused by thermal runaway. When this occurs, not only are toxic chemicals released in the air, but they are extremely hazardous to the first responders and the citizens within the area that are covered by the plume. In addition to the human aspect, the runoff that occurs from attempting to extinguish these systems are littered with the toxic chemicals that are detrimental to the environment, the animals, the people, and ultimately the Chesapeake Bay. With this, you can see the Caroline County Commissioners are in support of HB 1100, and they request a favorable report. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, sir. Thank you, Commissioner Barvey and committee. My name is Larry Porter. I'm serving my 4th term as Caroline County Commissioner. I'm also a volunteer firefighter. I joined the firefighting service in 1981 and was awarded life membership in 2003. As Delegate Jacobs stated, we have potential solar projects coming to our county. We had a discussion with some of the representatives about battery storage. We were basically told in so many words that if there was a problem or a meltdown, we were to not respond and get people away. That's not acceptable as far as I'm concerned. I'm also concerned about vehicle fires with electric vehicles and the effects that they would have on first responders. Although this would be an additional training for volunteers, it's an important opportunity to continue to provide safety. The volunteer firefighter motto is to save lives and protect property. I think we should do everything we can to save the lives of the people who put their lives on the line as volunteers every day. Thank you very much for the opportunity to travel across the bridge to come today, and we are certainly in support of this bill. Thank you.
Sure. By the way, I have 2 questions myself before I recognize others. Actually, one question. I noticed you mentioned lithium-ion. Why limit it to lithium-ion? There are other chemistries that are going to be coming, that are going to be introduced. Do you want us to like broaden that out and make it deal with other battery chemistries?
Certainly. I mean,
Okay.
you know, the video is very clear that storage facility was dealing with lithium-ion. And that's where I think the storage units that you've been
Yes.
in touch with in Caroline were also lithium, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And-
So I mean, certainly, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
We know the EV world's coming, and you know this, you know, the renewable energy, solar arrays are especially over in Caroline. They're really targeting the shore, and they, you know, they want to add these energy storing facilities in them. So it's coming.
You know,
It's coming, and we want to be prepared.
Well, that's my second question. The title, you know, talks about battery storage and solar arrays, but I don't think that you've identified any risky aspects of solar arrays, have you? It's really about batteries.
It's the battery storage is connected to them.
Can we get rid of the word solar array because we're really only worried about the batteries?
Well, I think it's worth a discussion.
Oh, no, I mean, remove it from the title of the bill, because I don't think, I mean, you know, solar arrays have their ups and downs, but blowing up isn't one of them.
Right. They're not the problem, and
right.
But they're, you know, they're the receiver of the energy, sending it to the battery storage. So
yeah,
I guess that's why the drafter put the language
well,
in
but
there.
you know, I believe that as in the future, we're going to need to store electricity from whatever source, and it's going to be stored in batteries. So it may not be a solar array providing the electricity. It might be a wind turbine or a nuclear power plant, you know, since those are the only three sources of clean energy.
I think that's a great point, Mr. Chairman, and we take that into consideration.
Okay. And one last final point here. On a per capita basis of ownership, gasoline engine fires are far outnumber electric battery car battery fires. Just go to the National Highway Safety Agency and look those numbers up. So anyway, the first question goes to Delegate Foley.
Mr. Chairman.
Could I respond to that?
Sure.
Well,
you're going to say that batteries are harder to put out.
Correct.
Okay. Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Delegate, for bringing this bill. My question is a simple one, which is how many of these battery storage facilities are there? Do you have a number of how many there are in the state?
I don't have a total number, but
you mean in Maryland, right?
In Maryland, yes. I'm sorry, yes.
I have heard from several counties that either have them or they are in the process of permitting them all around the state. I think we have a virtual witness coming up here shortly. That's from Prince George's Indian Head. I think there's a. Oh, we do have a virtual. I think there's a huge battery storage facility going to be at National Harbor, and I believe the next person is going to testify to that. So.
You know, I made a mistake. I didn't recognize the virtual witness, so you keep your button.
I didn't know if you were just going to take the panel or.
No, I made a mistake. That's.
Okay, well, that was my only question.
Well, let's see if is she still here? Okay, or he, rather. Yeah, put him up. I'm still getting used to this idea of having virtual witnesses.
There he is. It's Ron.
All right, Ron, sorry, I almost forgot about you. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair Barve and ENT committee members. Appreciate the opportunity to testify in favor of House Bill 1100. I'm Ron Weiss, the resident of Fort Washington and president of the Indian Head Highway Area Action Council. I have a background as an electrical engineer, and I've attended numerous community advisory group meetings with PEPCO regarding the National Harbor battery energy storage system that PEPCO plans to locate in a residential neighborhood. The PAG has had expert testimony from Dr. Ezekoye, who has done U.S. Department of Energy funded research in developing firefighting tactics on the risks of battery storage. And we've had testimony from Prince George's Fire and EMS Battalion Chief Wargo that our fire department is scrambling to learn how to fight battery fires. Their testimony is not comforting to the comfort of the community of people living with an impending threat to our lives and well-being. We've also found that Maryland and local regulations related to battery energy storage technology and safety are lacking or non-existent. We've also found that the Public Service Commission passes the buck to local jurisdictions for battery energy system safety. The 2020 Governor's Task Force on Renewable Energy recommended a streamlined standard to review and approve energy storage projects, and as far as I know, there's been no follow-up. Current energy storage projects are pilot projects, and utilities, first responders, and local regulators are learning how to protect citizens on the fly. We need front-end thought, regulation, and training to keep us safe, not on-the-job training after a hazardous system is operational. New York State and New York City appear to lead the nation on these type of regulations. I recommend that Maryland agencies emulate those jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Delegate Foley, do you have a question you want to put to them? There we go. I've got it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The delegate answered my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, next question goes to Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, thank you for this bill. It's a great bill. Mr. Chair stole one of my questions. I was going to ask about that lithium part. I'm a member of my local volunteer fire department, and I do believe Chair Barbe is right that we're going to be looking at all different kinds of batteries. So I think maybe that would be appropriate to take that language out. But my question for you is, reading the bill, I just want to make sure that we're not only looking at suppression, but we're also looking at rendering of aid as well, right? Because when you're out on a scene where there's a fire, obviously there could be people that are hurt. We're talking about potentially hazardous materials that are being emitted. So will there be, in that training, will there be also training for how to render aid and how to deal with that part of it? Do you know? I just wanted to kind of drill on that part of it there.
I think when they establish the training program, that would be part of it.
Okay.
I would certainly believe that would be specific to this type of fire suppression. That's the reason why, we're really trying to do something tied directly to this, because it's kind of unique in the manner in which you have to extinguish these things. It's not, it's not like a house fire where you run up there and give her a little shot of water. This is a much different operation. In the fire service, it's very difficult.
Sure. No, and I appreciate that. Just sometimes I can tell you that inside the fire service, sometimes it's like two different sides of the fence, right? The folks that want to run out and put fires out think about things in one way, and the other folks think about things in a different way. So I think it might be useful just to clarify that we're not just talking about suppression, but also the rendering of aid as well there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, good to see you. Kaylee. Delegate Jacobs, good bill. I only have one question that might relate to our committee, which is the manufacturers of these batteries. Do you view them as having any responsibility to participate in what would safety look like when they're manufacturing these batteries for a particular purpose?
I'd say they should be contributing to the CEF fund. When maybe that should be part of the fee when you permit these projects, that maybe they should be paying into that training fund as well. Because this, if you look at the makeup of it, it could be other funds added. So that's a good point.
Well, it may be such that that's already the case, but I think your bill sort of asks a question through grant funding. How do we help the counties in the state of Maryland, frankly, handle the risk and the danger of these types of fires? But more importantly, as I think this committee and our committee often does, when you have an industry that is emerging, there tend to be some obligations that can and should come forward from the industry. And the question went directly to, do you view as the sponsor of this bill the industry that is...
He wants to know if you support extended producer responsibility for batteries.
Sounds good to me. Isn't that so?
Well,
I think it's very important. I think it's relevant.
Well, I believe it is, Delegate, and we'll talk offline more about that. But the whole point of this is really to get on the front end of an emerging industry that has some challenges, and we want to make sure the fire service is trained properly and that we can respond to these things and protect lives and protect property, which is really the mission. I had a companion bill also at ECM tied to these same energy facilities that directs the PSC to make sure there's fire suppression is built into them. So
what happened to the bill?
Well, I have talked to those guys.
Oh, it's in their committee?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay.
But I mean, there are two bills that are really trying to you know, look at this issue and try and deal with some of the effects that are caused by it proactively, not reactively.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. That
Thank
ends
you.
the public hearing on House Bill 1100. Let's turn to House Bill 1209. Delegate Lehman.
Mr. Chairman, I touched the button, I'm sorry.
Oh, geez, that's it. No bills for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Haley.
Mr. Chairman, if I could bring up Matt Johnston
Yeah,
from
please
Arundel
do.
Rivers Federation.
When do you want your slides up? Now or later? When do you want your slides?
Yeah, right now, I guess, yeah. Okay.
Those two bills, are they ENV? So, Boyce's and Jacobs.
This mistake
Yeah,
is costing
I'm
us
sorry.
only Prime shoppers. Are you still using Prime? Because
Why does this image keep coming up for your bills, and even though is this having to do with this bill?
These, no,
Okay.
these maps do, but not,
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
yeah.
I remember seeing this slide before.
No, okay. Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Johnston will explain the
Okay.
maps. So, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to present House Bill 1209. For the record, I am your colleague, Delegate Mary Lehman. So this bill, as amended, requires the Maryland Department of Environment, beginning in 2025, to consider whether it needs to update its model floodplain ordinance to incorporate the impact of climate change on flooding risks across Maryland, hence the bill's name, the Climate Ready Floodplain Act of 2023. The original bill mandated an update of the state's 2018 model floodplain ordinance to consider the impacts of climate change. It also required MDE to work with county and municipal governments that have zoning authority to implement new floodplain maps and the state's model ordinance. However, given MDE's staffing challenges and years of inadequate funding, I came to agree with the agency and other stakeholders that such a mandate was not realistic in the short term. So the amendments changed the bill to require that MDE consider and consult with stakeholders every 5 years, beginning in July 2025, so a year later than originally envisioned, whether the state model floodplain ordinance needs to be updated. The stakeholders are enumerated in the amendments, and they include DNR, MACO, MML, the Maryland Association of Floodplain and Stormwater Managers, and the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. HB 1209 requires that this MDE-led group consider 6 factors when deciding whether to update the model ordinance. And those are, number 1, the combined effects on flood risk created by sea level rise. Number 2, storm surge. Number 3, increased precipitation. 4, increased temperature. 5, overflow from the waters of the state, and 6, extreme weather events. The bill also will make sure MDE takes into consideration the siting and design criteria outlined in the CoSmart standards that this committee adopted in 2018 for state-funded construction projects. The proposed amendments recognize the negative fiscal impact that MDE would have had to bear if the floodplain ordinance update was mandated every 5 years, as was laid out in the original bill. So the amended bill is a more measured approach. It's a more fiscally sound approach, while still acknowledging that there is a need for a regular assessment of flood risk in our state. The bill is meant to address the growing risk of flooding in Maryland that stems from climate change, as well as the fact that our state is more vulnerable to flooding than many other states because of its already low-lying areas. That includes right here in Annapolis, as well as many areas on the Eastern Shore. Thank you for your consideration of the Climate Ready Floodplain Act of 2023. A significant amount of work has been done to create a consensus bill, and I am grateful to MDE and the other stakeholder groups that you will hear from, who mostly were originally opposed but are mostly now favorable with amendments. I respectfully ask for a favorable report on this bill as amended, and I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, who'd like to go next or first?
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Matt Johnston, Executive Director of Arundel Rivers Federation. Traditionally, Arundel Rivers Federation is a local watershed organization that protects and restores our rivers here in Anne Arundel County. But more recently, we've entered into the climate resilience realm, and we've started to consider protecting our communities through new best management practices, including flood pumps and ditch revisions so that we can actually protect our communities from flooding. And that's why I'm here today. I'm here testifying in favor of HB 1209 because it's no secret to any of us that the terms 100-year flood and 500-year flood used to be jargon amongst only floodplain managers and engineers, and now are on the tips of our tongues more and more often. I want to show you just some work that this committee has approved in the past on the screen here, how we have new information about where flooding is going. On the screen here, you see Lewisdale, Prince George's County, and on the left, you see the Federal Emergency Management Association's floodplain maps. These are what are given to counties to protect residents from flooding. They know that floods are likely to occur in those blue and orange areas, and they need to purchase flood insurance. On the right is a newer map that this committee approved a few years back, or commissioned a few years back, the Coast Smart Climate Ready Action Boundary Map. This shows an increase into this area of 3 feet above the floodplain level. And I'll go to another one, Salisbury in Wicomico County, just north of downtown Salisbury. You can see all the areas on the right that are outside the FEMA map. And another one, Shadyside, Anne Arundel County, Maryland. We know that floods are coming to our communities, and HB 1209, as amended, is here to set up a process whereby we update with best management practices how we protect our residents in floodplains, and we use the latest and greatest data to make new flood maps, and I urge a favorable report, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, we have signed up also Matt Pluta and Doug Myers and Greg Smith virtually. So are Matt and Doug, well, I see Doug. Okay. Doug, you're next.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Doug Myers, Maryland Senior Scientist for Chesapeake Bay Foundation. We support this bill and just learning of the amendments. So I think what we understand about the amendments is that it's the same bill with different timeline and different mechanisms. So Maryland's coastal wetlands are disappearing at a rate where sea level rise is combining with things like the ditch network and our increased rainfall regimes. And so looking forward, being able to project some of these processes to 2050 is a very wise way to take a look at our real flood risk. HB 1209 takes advantage of significant new science projecting sea level rises to the mid-century timeframe and allows communities the ability to adjust by taking a look at both a model ordinance and then their own floodplain ordinances. Addressing sea level rise sets a reasonable time frame and the adoption of local ordinances. Together, the provisions of HB 1209 will prepare Maryland's coastal communities for the near future as we continue to lower the greenhouse gas emissions that are causing disruption. And I don't have the time in front of me. Okay, 50 seconds. I just recently read a Maryland Sea Grant report that's also looking at this issue from the standpoint of farmers that are addressing saltwater intrusion to their fields, creating problems with them being less productive. And that is also affected by the ditch network and by the rainfall regime. So not just the communities that we're showing here on the screen, but also our rural communities are facing some of these same issues. And having information about what those inundation risks look like in the future will be really important for them to make decisions on whether they can resist it, whether they have to adapt to it, and whether they have to make new investments to have a different land use for their land. Thank you.
Before I go to Greg Smith, who's virtual, the ditch network, I assume that's a network of ditches that
Yeah, so
drains water?
So throughout, every part of Maryland, we have a ditch network that was designed to drain the land, especially on the eastern shore.
I can't believe I've been the chairman of this committee for 9 years, and this is the first I've heard
Yeah.
of the ditch network.
But at very low elevations, it's also kind of a conduit to let salt water in.
Okay, all right. Is Greg Smith with us virtually? Is he out there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Do you want to hear me?
Yes, we want to hear
Okay.
you.
Okay, excellent. All right, let me scroll down a little bit before you start the clock, please. Good afternoon. I'm Greg Smith, and I serve on the board of Sustainable Hyattsville. I urge the committee to issue a favorable report on HB 1209, and I urge all committee members to champion its passage. Some of you might remember. Some of you might remember the old AMCO transmission ad line. You can pay me now or you can pay me later. And then there's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I'll offer a prime example of why we need the Assembly to give MDE, other agencies, and the affected public the tools and mandates this bill would provide. Sustainable Hyattsville has been fighting a floodplain development since 2018. Most or all of the site lies in the currently delineated 100-year floodplain of the lower northwest branch of the Anacostia River. The Anacostia is tidal up to Bladensburg, and the northwest branch is subject to storm surges at least as far upstream as this site, which is adjacent to families' homes, public parks, a non-tidal wetland, and a primary tributary. It's also adjacent to and upstream of EJ communities. In 2004, our county council wisely rezoned that parcel from residential open space, specifically because it lies within the 100-year floodplain and should not be developed. In 2019, in an entirely political decision, we think, the council reversed that decision and approved more than 40 townhouses at $800,000 in the floodplain. Here's some of what we've learned in challenging the project. The precipitation data the developer and the county have relied upon may be more than 20 years obsolete. The effective year for FEMA's floodplain maps is for the county is 2016, but the data those maps rely on may be more than 10 years old. The county has developed its own sub-watershed maps of certain areas, and they show significantly more land in the 100-year floodplain than FEMA's maps, but the county has ignored its own maps. We've seen no evidence in the record that the developers' stormwater management or floodplain mitigation plans or the county and state agency reviews take climate change into account at all. This is I'll close with this. If your child or grandchild were thinking about buying her first home and she were looking at an area near a stream or bay, what would you advise? Would you advise her to rely on the current floodplain maps and ignore climate change? Or would you say, sweetheart, have you checked whether the maps are reliable? And have you looked at have you looked elsewhere to buy a home? Mother Nature doesn't care how clever we think we are. She doesn't care how sophisticated our models and spreadsheets are. She doesn't grade on a curve, and she always bats last. Thank you very much.
Okay. This is all the people who are purely favorable have spoken, so let's go to some questions. Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. This framework looks vaguely familiar to me, as it seems like the 2021 stormwater legislation that we passed. Can you talk to me a little bit about why you chose this framework and how it's different or the same as the work that this committee has done on stormwater?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you so much for the question, Delegate Love, and it was a lot of fun back in 2021 putting that bill together. Great question. The way that we redrafted this bill with MDE and with stakeholders was to say, you're right, we as the legislature, perhaps we shouldn't be prescriptive about exactly what goes in a model floodplain ordinance and exactly how you do the maps. Perhaps that is better done by the stakeholders on a work group. That is the same approach that we took in 2021. But what we put in 2021 and what we put in this redrafted bill, thanks to the sponsor, is we don't want to have this conversation with MDE and the stakeholders demanding it the next time that we see a big flood. We want a process whereby they are at the table together working on this once every 5 years. And if we're all at the table, we're all going to have our voices heard in the final maps and the final regulations.
And Delegate Love, if I just might, it became clear to me that we had to look for take a different approach, look for some other solution while still getting at, as Mr. Johnston said, a periodic look at the model ordinance. And that was primarily a very candid conversations with MDE about how right now, at this point in time, they simply do not have the staffing to deal with this a year from now, which is what the original bill called for in 2024 to have a first look. And then there was opposition from a variety of the stakeholder groups about what that would mean at the county and municipal level about triggering the review at those levels to adopt a model ordinance, a new model ordinance every time MDE did. Also, Mr. Chairman, if I might, I think this will be helpful for anyone that wants to just have a look either now or, in the next few days or in subcommittee. I was concerned that because these amendments are pretty substantive, that there should be a reprint of the bill. I talked to Kristen Flynn about this. We couldn't figure out, even though these requests were made in enough time for a reprint and amendments, we couldn't find them in the system anywhere. They're actually under testimony. They do appear, if people want to look, on the floor system, they appear under my name under testimony. They don't appear under amendments or in other places you would think they would. We finally found them. So I just wanted to let folks know that.
Okay. Next question, Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the bill, and I'm looking at the fiscal note, and it says the bill requires MDE to publish statewide flood risk assessment maps. As I recall, way back in the old days, FEMA prepares the floodplain maps. So are you suggesting here that MDE just take the FEMA maps and publish them? What is the coordination between FEMA and MDE? I'm not getting that connection at all.
It's been a great process over the last 2 weeks working with MDE to figure out that exact process. And while we don't understand it to a T, what we understand is that the federal maps are a product of MDE and the federal government. So MDE is actually right now applying for grants to do work on future FEMA maps, right? To publish these future maps. What we have said in this bill is, yeah, keep doing that, but also we know that there are pieces that we're missing. The stormwater flooding that isn't captured in FEMA maps, the sea level rise, the future storms that are not captured in the current maps. Please use the data that you have available to assess that while you are working with the federal government to publish the next round of FEMA maps.
But I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Delegate Holmes, I was just going to point out, too, that the maps are significantly outdated at this point. And,
yes,
and the one other thing that I would say, going back to my point about MDE being underfunded and understaffed, is they talk to us in detail about grant money, federal grant money they're going after that could help them, in terms of staffing and resources to better get at the ordinance, an updated ordinance and mapping.
But I understand that, I'm just trying to get, as a young technician, the client we had was FEMA to prepare the flood maps, okay? So FEMA hired us to prepare the flood maps. How does FEMA coordinate with, what do you want to do with the, I'm not quite sure what the coordination is here. I'm lost. FEMA is the one that gets the maps done based upon the science. Right?
It is our understanding, Delegate, talking to Department of the Environment, and I hope they'll follow up because they are, I think, acceptable on these amendments. We reviewed them with them and they're happy and they're excited that they get to do this work. It's our understanding they are coordinating with FEMA on every community's map update. So there is coordination between the two entities.
So you're suggesting that FEMA is preparing a map and MDE is preparing a separate map. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm suggesting they're doing it in tandem together, coordinating, and then coordinating with the community. And I hope MDE will answer that if the committee has any follow-up questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is kind of sort of a follow-up to Delegate Holmes's question. What would happen if there was disagreement between the MDE map and the FEMA map? I just wouldn't want to see someone lose like flood insurance coverage or something like that, federal, you know, if there was some sort of disagreement between the maps there with a floodplain.
That is such a great question, and what we have written in is that you have to have a minimum requirement is the National Flood Insurance Program requirements. National Flood Insurance Program requirements say you got to adopt the FEMA map, right? So there would be no throwing out the FEMA map. If FEMA and the state and this work group agree that that map should actually be expanded to include stormwater flooding and future storms that we're seeing, that is what this work group can do in the future. This work group could also in the future say, thank you so much for showing us where this stormwater flooding is going to occur. We're not going to adopt that map. We're just going to adopt recommendations for what you do as a community when you have construction in those areas. We don't want to be too prescriptive here, but we want our communities to know that this flooding is coming, and it's here.
And Delegate, if I could also point out at the very end of the bill, the last page, there is a section requiring MDE to establish a process to educate communities about flood risk specific to those communities and also help units of local government that have planning and zoning authority. Again, that would be all counties. It would be only those municipalities with zoning authority to implement new floodplain maps and the model floodplain ordinance if that's determined that that's needed every 5 years.
Thank you, Delegate and panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question was a local question, a local mandate. Now FEMA's doing their maps and MD's doing their maps and everybody's supposed to be working together. Where do the counties get a say in this? And how are the counties supposed to fund the requirement to work these maps in the 1%, 2% grades and things like that that you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple of things. One, if a community participates in the National Flood Insurance Program, they have to adopt the FEMA maps. So that process is already in place, right? So the next round of maps that comes through, maybe they'll be revised based on this. Also in the bill, the last section talks about assisting units of local government with planning and zoning authority in implementing new floodplain maps and the model floodplain ordinance. Now, that's another piece. There's a model floodplain ordinance. It's already out there, a 2018 version. This bill says let's update that version every 5 years. When a community accepts the new maps, currently, they also have to accept similar or more strict ordinance to the model floodplain ordinance. So this process is out there, and MDE is here in this bill to assist local governments in that process moving forward. But they certainly do that right now. Assist local governments in it.
But there still be a local, excuse me, there could still be a local government requirement to put effort into these maps to go, I think the floodplain's 1,000 feet, I think is the number, the magic number. Is that right?
The what?
1,000 foot, 1,000 feet back, or for the NFIP?
Are you talking about setbacks?
Setbacks, yeah.
Oh, I don't know the exact setback number, but again, that is a piece of a model ordinance, the setback from the floodplain or floodway.
Okay, I can talk to you later about
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Thank you.
happy to.
Okay.
Okay, there appear to be no further questions, so we will go to the people who are signed up favorable with the amendment, and they are Lori Graff, Dominic Butchko, and Tom Ballantyne. I believe that Dominic Butchko is going to begin his testimony by thanking the sponsor for having put in the bill.
I wouldn't go that far. Mr. Chair.
So then you don't really hate it.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dominic Butchko with the Maryland Association of Counties. I will thank the bill sponsor for working so closely with us hand in hand, as well as the advocates. I will say that the way this bill was originally drafted, MACO would oppose, but because of that close working relationship, we are here support with amendments. And so I want to break it down for you, what is really going on. So there are two issues we are trying to solve. The first one we just had some conversation on in regards to the maps. There are some concerns that the FEMA maps aren't necessarily as accurate, and so we have to take action as a state to get more accurate data. MACO fully supports that effort. The second issue is the model floodplain ordinance, and how do we go about amending that, especially in the guise of climate change and everything else. MACO does support some provisions in the new process to update that ordinance. I will say that we do have some subject matter experts here with us today. I did receive some feedback from them recently that I think we are close to finding a deal on this bill. I don't know if we're 100% there yet. I think their feedback is something we should weigh very heavily because they are the ones who are implementing this every day. So again, I would just encourage the committee to give consideration to their testimony and their concerns, but otherwise I think we're close, and this is an issue that we definitely have to address, and counties urge a favorable report with amendments. Thank you.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'll go next. Tom Ballantyne with NIOP, Maryland. The Commercial Real Estate Trade Association, our members own buildings in the Inner Harbor of Baltimore around the port. Most of the footprint of the crab map that was described earlier is residential, but there are key areas of the state that have some commercial impacts. In past years, we were strong opponents of this bill. We thought it was prescriptive, and it didn't use the existing regulatory structure from FEMA to MDE to local governments with their floodplain ordinances and administered by the local building officials. There are pieces of the building code that deal with this kind of these issues. So the question is, the FEMA maps are backward-looking. The crab map is forward-looking and predictive. And how do you blend that together, right? We think that the amendments that we've seen, that we understand have changed the bill into a working group that will consider certain aspects of this in renovating or revising the maps and the floodplain ordinances. The only amendment, the additional amendment that we would request is that there be a private sector engineer with design experience added to the working group. That's exactly the same amendment that we requested during the A-Storm legislation where we were same position, support with amendments. Thank you.
Before I recognize Lori, did you say crab map?
Yeah, it's the acronym for what Mr. Johnston described to you.
Wow.
I don't know what it
first there was
stands for.
the ditch network, now there's the crab map.
Yeah.
What new terms await me in Lori's testimony? Go ahead, Lori.
I am so sorry to disappoint you.
Chicken map.
I am very sorry to disappoint you. I don't think I have anything with that. My name is Lori Graff, CEO of Maryland Building Industry Association. You've obviously heard me talk many, many times before about housing and our concerns with hurting our ability to build more housing. As I will just echo Mr. Ballantyne's thoughts on this. This is, as Delegate Love pointed out, very similar to the bill that we passed in 2021, which we did support. We do ask for the private sector person to be added to the work group. But other than that, we are happy with this work product. We look forward to seeing what other amendments are added and hope to be able to come with a good work group that will help fix the problem and move things forward. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for this group of witnesses? Apparently not. Thank you very much. We'll go to the two opponents, Amy Mordock and Angelica Bailey Tupari. Okay, who'd like to go first?
I will, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Angelica Bailey Thupar with the Maryland, almost said the Maryland Building Industry Association. Wow, what a throwback. The Maryland Municipal League. It's been a long afternoon for all of us, I can tell, so I'll be very, very quick. I echo everything that MACO spoke to. We've had some fantastic conversations with the sponsor. At this point, MML does remain opposed, but we look forward to seeing the reprint and continuing to work on those amendments. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, Chairman Barb and members of the committee. My name is Amy Mordock. I am the Planning Director for Queen Anne's County. I am also a certified floodplain manager, and I'm the chair of the Maryland Association of Floodplain and Stormwater Managers. Today, I'm speaking on behalf of Queen Anne's County. Our organization, MAFSM, has submitted an informational letter for your review, so I'm not going to speak to those issues today. Again, I laud the delegate for putting forward this bill and Matt for his assistance in crafting it. We have been in close communication, so I don't enjoy opposing the bill, but I do have some key concerns, and some of the questions that were raised by the delegates relative to my concerns I want to echo. And that is specifically a concern that we may be commingling various state and federal regulations. So there is a very clear process for how FEMA updates their maps. We do have updated maps. They were first drafted in 1984. They were updated in 2018 with LIDAR data. I know Delegate Jacobs can attest to the fact that those old paper 1984 maps were actually surprisingly accurate, having gone through Hurricane Isabel. And so the maps that we have right now are more accurate and were LIDAR based. Those maps trigger our ordinance updates. They're required. So we have these very clear processes that we follow, and there are 5 billion policyholders in the United States in terms of the National Flood Insurance Program. So it's a serious concern that at the local level that our floodplain maps and our floodplain ordinance is separate from stormwater and extreme precipitation and climate change models.
Okay. Terrific. Delegate Holmes has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Right here.
There you go.
Can you give us a scenario on how the federal and the state could coordinate or should coordinate with these maps?
Yes. I think that there are a lot of processes currently in place. The CRAB map, for instance, is an illustrative model that is a policy-driven model. The A-Storm model will be very similar. When FEMA establishes these maps, and those maps are generated, and you're familiar with how that is done, local jurisdictions have the ability to take more restrictive provisions and go above and beyond. So what I see as very valuable in this legislation is not to prescribe suggested ordinance updates or prescribe a plan of action at the end. I think a committee very similar to the committee that was formed for the Coast Smart Council that would inform how Maryland is going to be more proactive and restrictive and where those regulations should sit, because not all of those regulations probably belong under the National Flood Insurance Program. Many of them will fall under our stormwater management provisions with MDE.
Follow up if I could.
But before you follow up, I just want you to know that CRAB stands for Climate Ready Action Boundaries. By a show of hands, how many people had heard of that term? Jay, what about you? Had you ever heard of it?
Well, and what it does, and so I'm very familiar with the model.
I'm just shocked that I'd not heard it in 9 years.
It's basically an attempt to capture those inundation models that are out there. An issue with the CRAB is that it doesn't establish a policy. It's not the definitive map. So
Okay.
a subcommittee that looks at what that definitive map should be, if we're going to establish regulation, that would be valuable. And that's
Do you
what,
still remember your follow-up question?
No.
Well, if you think of it, I'll recognize you after Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Amy, I was just looking through your testimony. It looked like there was maybe one or two other things that you didn't get a chance to talk about, but I thought they were interesting. Would you kind of just run through those real quick for me, those one or two that are in your written testimony there that maybe you didn't get to hit because your time ran out there?
yes, thank you.
Sure.
So what you had in front of you is a letter from our county administrator, Todd Mon. And so some of the specific concerns that we have are relative to the language that looks at considering on a shall basis, considering prohibitions to certain types of construction in the regulated floodplain. It's not that local jurisdictions aren't in a position where we think we should consider changes in more prescriptive measures, but a flat-out prohibition as a starting point for consideration in this bill puts local communities in a position where all of the hard work that has been done through the years to update our vulnerability studies, to implement the nuisance flood plan, our hazard mitigation plans, that took a lot of community education. That took a lot of citizen education, education of local officials, and to now nestle a consideration of prohibition on certain types of construction in our, some of our disadvantaged communities where we're looking at social equity issues. We feel as though this might be more harmful to all of our climate resiliency efforts if we don't have a very publicly vetted conversation about how we're going to get there. I don't think it's a matter of disagreeing that we need to get there, but it's the transparency of how we're going to do that that has caused concern and has caused Queen Anne's County to take this position.
Thank you. I thought that was interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in terms of prohibiting building in certain places, and forgive me if everybody else knows the answer to this, but when you buy a national flood insurance policy, does your premium cover the cost? Is that a, you know, a balanced fund, or does the taxpayer pick up the tab?
So that works in several different ways. When you purchase a property in the floodplain, and if you have a mortgage, you're required to have flood insurance. And that flood insurance will cover certain costs if there is a disaster. And it depends on the policy that you hold, but there are basic policy provisions. And when you build to meet the floodplain requirements, then your insurance rate is much lower. But those flood insurance costs, if you are compliant with your policy, are carried by the flood insurance companies. It's when there is a natural disaster on a large scale and there is a declaration of emergency, that is when federal funds come into play with mitigation efforts.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one question. Would you be able to consume cannabis in these floodplain areas?
If you're anchored. Yes. You must be anchored.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Thank you. I remembered my question. On floodplain insurance requirements, based upon the coordination that's being sought out by MDE, the counties, and FEMA, which one of those maps would take precedence over requiring floodplain insurance?
The FEMA maps are the bottom line, and all of the counties receive annual visits. They're called CAVs, Community Assistance Visits, and they're biannual. Our FEMA representative, ours is Region 3, comes and does a complete evaluation of our program administration. And if there is non-compliance with the floodplain ordinance that's connected to the maps, then all of the policyholders within that local community, their flood insurance is in jeopardy. So it's definitely connected to the FEMA maps.
So the MDE and the county maps could show more flooding than the FEMA map. And even though it shows that your house would be flooded based upon the local and state maps, you still would not be required to get insurance. Is that correct?
Well, and this is a part of the concern, is the FEMA maps are going to address the National Flood Insurance Program. They're called FIRMs, Flood Insurance Rate Maps. Mm-hmm. The inundation models are looking at stormwater
Calves,
quantity.
firms.
So That is different, and that's why I think it's important that stormwater provisions are addressed, maybe individually, and not absorbed in a floodplain ordinance.
I got it. Thank you. The explanation is perfect. I got it. Thank you.
Okay, so what's a CAV again?
Community assistance visit. That's FEMA assisting a local jurisdiction.
And firms?
A flood insurance rate map.
So many new terms. Let me just, you know, it just occurred to me, if your property is not in the FEMA map, but the state of Maryland says it could be flooded, then theoretically, because it's not in the FEMA map, you should be able to get the insurance a little more cheaply, shouldn't you?
A lot of people do get flood insurance that are not located in the floodplain, and it has to do with groundwater.
But it would probably be cheaper than insurance in the FEMA flood map.
It is.
Aha, okay. I got to make that into an acronym. There appear to be no further questions, so that ends the public hearing on House Bill 1209. Let us turn now to Wicomico County and the entreaties from Cornbread. Whew. He's got a crab map, a map of all the great crab places in Ocean City. That's his crab map.
You know it,
Yeah.
everywhere. So, family, Mr.
Hey.
Chairman.
How you doing?
It's good to be home.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Good to
be
have you
home.
back.
I'd like to ask the good delegate from Montgomery County who's occupying my former seat, you know, how's she treating you? Is she treating you all right? So, what you doing for dinner tonight? So, as in regards to my good friend from Somerset County, I too grew up in Somerset County, and you can do a lot of things in floodplains, including cannabis. That was truly hilarious. So, I'm sorry, which bill do we have up first? We have three in a row. We have
Why don't we take 1004?
The sanitary district, perfect, absolutely perfect.
Because we know how much you're into sanitariness.
Very sanitary, absolutely. Great moments are born from great opportunities. And that's what we have here. That's what we've earned here today. Many bills come through here. You'll vote them down, you'll get rid of them, but not these three. Oh no, not these three. These are three of the most beautiful pieces of legislation that have ever been written in the English language. That's the only language I know, so I can't compare it to anything else. So up first, I'm getting ahead of myself. Up first, Mr. Chair, is committee members, family. First off, allow me to introduce my county executive, our new county executive from Wicomico County.
Nice to meet you all.
Some of y'all may remember this strapping middle-aged fellow. He is the county administrator in Wicomico County, and
I know, I stole him away. So, yeah.
absolutely, we gave him to you. But so up first is House Bill 1004 that will allow Wicomico County to establish a sanitary commission. As you know, Wicomico County is moving forward. We're looking to do countywide wastewater, and in order to make that happen, we need to have this commission established. So we came here to pass this bill. I will yield my time to the awesome county executive.
Oh, thank you.
to
I'll
move
pay you
forward.
later for that one.
You got it.
Yeah. Thank you, and good afternoon. Thanks for seeing us all. And Mr. Chair, thank you so much for hearing this. So environmental health is very important to me as the
Your
executive.
name for the record
Oh,
is
I'm sorry.
Julie
Sorry.
Giordano?
Yes, Julie
Yes.
Giordano, County Executive. Sorry about that. I forgot that not everybody knows me. Sorry. But yes, environmental health is very important to me as the executive in Wicomico and to my administration and to the citizens of my county. And again, we are one of the few remaining counties that don't have a sanitary commission. And so that is why we are here before you today. So we have had water and sewer issues since the 1960s, and administration after administration has kicked this can down the road. So I have been in office about 90 days now, and this was one of the top priorities of my administration. So I ran on this, understanding how important environmental health is, especially in my county. And so we're asking for a favorable report to be able to create a sanitary commission in Wicomico.
Okay, Bunky.
Hi, my name is Bunky Luffman. I'm the Director of Administration of Wycomico County, and don't hold it against me, but former legislative aide for Delegate Anderton. So I remember working with Trish in the committee sometimes. So before my time as legislative aide, I was a wastewater operator, so this is something that in fact, I met my wife at a wastewater plant. So something I'm really...
They're really romantic
So
in
something I know
Wacomico.
very well, you know. It's true. That's right.
You think that's funny?
That's right.
That's how we do that.
So
what we
it's
do.
vitally important for our county. We have about 18,000 people, our homes on septic. We have two different models. One would pick up 10,000, and that's by us building off of the 7 of our 8 municipalities have existing plants, so this would be allow us to build off of them. And then the about 5,000 more we'd be able to collect through standing up our own plant. So it's vitally important, especially with the combination of subsidence and climate change and local flooding. As you heard, the last bill with stormwater and failing septics. This is a vitally important bill, so I request your favorable report.
Well, you know, when it comes to you and your wife, after all, the lotus flower grows out of the mucky, scummy waters. So,
there you go.
Matt Stegman is also signed up. Why don't you come up, Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Matt Stegman from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. We're here to ask for a favorable report on this bill. It's a very simple bill. It would grant Wacomico County the same authority that, to the best of my knowledge, every other county on the Eastern Shore already has to create a sanitary district. Maybe asking about the septics, why this is an issue. Most of the wells that were built prior to the year 2000 access drinking water from shallow aquifers. These are more susceptible to being infiltrated by effluent if you have a failing septic, and I don't think that the committee needs an explanation of why you don't want effluent in your drinking water.
They may.
So it is a tremendous issue in terms of water quality and public health, and the Chesapeake Bay Foundation has had the opportunity to sit on a public-private advisory committee that's been hosted by the Greater Salisbury Committee, making recommendations on, what this sanitary district might eventually look like. And in order for any of those things to come to pass, the county needs that authority. So we ask you to give it, and we ask for a favorable report.
Yeah, thank you. So what you're basically doing is setting up a WSSC-like commission for Wicomico.
Yep.
Thank you.
But no, actually, no. It's only
Well, it's just for one county, though, yeah.
Right. That's why I said
Something
WSSC-like
similar to
Yes.
therein.
Yes, sir.
for Wicomico County. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, so that ends the public hearing on that bill. Let's go to House Bill 1087, Sunday hunting, archery hunting safety zones.
I know I didn't hear some groans. Did somebody just groan?
Yeah, no, you didn't.
It's a beautiful bill.
That was just a, it was a door squeaking in the background. You ground? Oh, you ground? Okay.
So, we're still here. This is House Bill 1087. Delegate Carl Anderson, Delegate Cornbread, many other names you could use if you chose to. I have with me one of our newest Wycomico County Council members, Mr. James Wynn, to my right, and then to my left, probably not politically, but definitely in the physical presence, is his father, here to testify as well. So I will turn this over to you, my friend.
All right. Well, my name is James Wynn. Yes, I am a Wacomico County Council member. I'm here to testify for Sunday hunting. Wacomico County is 400 square miles. It's primarily fields and woods. And so a lot of people, they experience the outdoors, and most of us work 40-hour days during the week. Doesn't really give everyone ample time to enjoy the outdoors effectively as if we could if we had a full weekend. So today I'm here as a council member, and we submitted a letter of support from the county signed by the executive in support of this bill to hopefully proceed, and I hope that we can get a favorable response from this. It would benefit our county tremendously and make a lot of my constituents happy. Thank you.
I guess this is me. I'm Danny Wynn. I'm glad to address you guys. And I'm from Wacomico County, and it's pretty rural. We do a lot of hunting and fishing over there. It's a big thing. It's a big part of our pastime. It's one of the things that we like to do with our families, and we like to, I'm self-employed, so I'm a contractor, and I work 6 days a week. So having Sunday to hunt it would be an advantage for me. And there's a lot of people like me in my area that would agree with that. So we would like a favorable, favorable support on that. That's what I'm here for.
Okay, thank you. We also have Jessica Mislinski, who is signed up remotely. She's not there? Okay, not there. So let's go to questions. Any questions? No questions, okay. One person is signed up in opposition, however, also virtual, Corinne Marie Pollenquin. Is she there? Okay.
Yes, I'm here, but
Okay.
you guys have to allow video if you want to see me.
We can hear you, that's the most important
Okay.
thing.
Oh, well, hang on.
Oh, here you are,
Yep.
there you go.
Yeah,
Oh, I
okay.
remember you.
Yes, you remember from
Yeah.
last year, same issue. So yes, my name is Corinne Marie Flequin, and I am testifying on behalf of the Maryland Horse Council, and we oppose House Bill 1087. And addressing some of the comments that were made earlier, we would like to note that we represent equestrians in the state of Maryland, and surveys have found, including DNR's surveys, that over 70% of the population, of the Maryland population, oppose Sunday hunting. Even in rural areas, the statistics show that it's only 60%, I'm sorry, that it is 60% that oppose Sunday hunting in rural areas. And this is from surveys that are published by DNR and that the Maryland Horse Council has undertaken. Although we respect hunters, I have my own farm and we hunt on our farm as well. We would like to work out an arrangement where we can share use of these natural resources. So, the hunting population is about 2% of the Maryland population. Surveys have also shown that, especially during COVID, over 24% of the Maryland population have enjoyed the outdoors. So what we're basically asking is that others, other than hunters, i.e. the other 98% of the Maryland population, can enjoy our time outside and on the trails safely, without needing to worry about gunfire. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to address them, but we would ask for an unfavorable report on House Bill 1087.
Thank you. Any questions? I don't see any, so thank you very much, one and all. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 1087. Let's go to House Bill 1003. Yep.
All right, the third of the three most amazing pieces of legislation you will hear today. This one is awesome. Just truly spectacular. So I am just, I can't even be serious with you, man.
You mean you were able to be serious with us when you were on this committee?
Never.
Let's have you be bailed out by your county executive.
Absolutely, please do so. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Have at it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this.
Mm-hmm.
Again, thank you so much for hearing this. So this legislation, we understand, is very tricky. We know that. We know the original bill that was put in, there were some amendments made to it. Right now, what's important to me in Wacomico County is that I have a business right now that employs 70 people that can't open. And I need to figure out the very best way to get these people back to work. Right now, as the executive, I look at these, the letters of opposition, and I hate to start with that, but I look at these letters of opposition from MDE and I look from the Maryland Department of Health, and they very much upset me. And not so much because what they said is not upsetting. It is upsetting what they said. But a lot of it is not really factual. And that's what's very frustrating to me. So in the first part, we would like our seasonal restaurants to be able to operate with a pump and haul system when pressurized potable water and septic tie-in or water and sewer is not available. Unfortunately, in my county, it is not the business owner's fault. It is the lack of leadership in previous administrations on why this business is in the predicament that they're in. And I want you to know that my administration takes the environmental health not only of my county, but also of my people very seriously. We are trying to find the cleanest way to do this. And I'm going to be very honest with you. I know that per certain regulations, the easy fix would be to tie them into a septic. I really don't want any more waste going into a septic that's right near our river. I would prefer it to be pumped and hauled away by by a licensed contractor where these receipts are being turned into our health department saying we are doing it the cleanest, most efficient way to get any sort of unwanted sediment away from this river. Oh, I had so much more to say. Okay. Sorry, but I just, I think the thing that frustrates me is I look at this, for example, from the Maryland Department of Health, from MDE, and as the executive, I cannot fathom keeping a business closed because of words like may happen, may conflict, could be used. There's no definitive facts. This could happen, and that is not what is happening here. And when we talk about seasonal restaurants, we are not talking about anything new. We are talking about already established restaurants. What's interesting to me is that when you think of the Eastern Shore, you think of hundreds of seasonal restaurants because you think of Ocean City. Do you know how many seasonal restaurants we have in Wacomico County? 2. One, both owned by the same person, and one of them is in this bill. So we are literally talking about the most narrow window. We are not talking about any new seasonal restaurants opening. We would never, and of course we don't want this as a statewide bill because this affects us because of irresponsibility from past administrations. And as the executive, I am pro small business, but I'm also pro environment. And I am thinking of the best way to open this business to get 70 people back to work and keep my river and the Wacomico River clean.
That was good. Holy
Did you like
moly.
that? Yeah.
Okay, let's go to questions.
That's what's up.
Delegate Holmes has a
I'm ready.
question.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Or no, Holmes. Oh, sorry.
Sir?
Yes,
Yeah,
sorry.
no.
No, she smiled, so I was like, over here, but that wasn't you. Yeah, sorry. Yes, sir.
So I'm looking at the text of the bill. So I'm just referring to the language in the bill.
Yes, sir.
Not all the other tangible. What is the water being used? What do you want the water to be used for?
Yes.
I don't see that in the language.
It's a hand washing station.
It's his hand washing station. So what has happened with this, honestly, is that if this restaurant was to able to purchase a food truck and roll it right up to the facility, there would be no question. I wouldn't even need to be here. But we don't want them to have to purchase a $50,000 to $100,000 food truck, for this system. But it's a hand washing system. So what's happening is they're coming out of the restroom, washing their hands, and the water is being pumped to a tank and then emptied once a week, twice a week. So it's literally hand washing water with organic soap.
And it goes to a wastewater facility.
And then it goes to a wastewater facility for treatment.
So the original water that goes to the sink comes from the well system.
Another tank.
Another tank.
Another tank. So so actually what you do, you're recirculating the hand washing water.
Well, no, it's clean water in.
Clean water in.
Dirty water out.
Yeah,
so it
dirty
comes
water
from-
out and then taken away and then treated.
So it comes from a well.
So, right.
Originally, yes.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
That's what I said. Yeah, it comes from a
Yes,
well.
sir.
And then you recirculate it for hand washing. Okay, I got it.
Yes, sir.
So you're seeking to use gray water for the hand washing station?
No, we're just looking to be able to dispose of the gray water the way that they have been.
The pump and haul method,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
So basically, this is a food truck without wheels,
Exactly.
Okay.
for all intents and purposes. Yeah.
Okay. I've been told that gray water is probably the wrong word in the title, but anyway. Okay.
I don't like it either.
Well, I think the thing that when you hear gray water, I think people think sewage or like very nasty waste. At some points in time, there was some issues, I think, last year with this.
We'll call it used water.
This is literally hand washing water with organic soap. And we made sure that was actually one of my things, that they needed to use organic soap because they are so close to the water. So, not that anything's going anywhere, but just in case, but not that anything's
Thank you,
going anywhere.
Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask the good delegate, is that gray water in that bottle that you're?
Well, it was, and it was fantastic. The organic soap helped. So.
It's watermelon soap.
Okay. Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think this has already been asked, but I want to, because I think last year we had a lot of, we may have misunderstood what this was doing.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
I just want to be clear. So the water that's used to wash hands is well water that meets quality standards for cleanliness and so forth.
Correct, yes.
Okay, and so the so-called gray water is the water from the sink after the hands are washed, and it's stored in a tank, and then that tank is hauled away.
Yes.
Correct.
Is that what we're talking about allowing here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm new to this topic of conversation, so
Me
it's going to
too.
sound like a crazy question.
Go for it.
I'm just wondering, so if this is a seasonal restaurant, is there a restroom at the restaurant where the wastewater is going to a septic, or?
So there's two options here. So actually so the way that the facility is set up, it's almost like a unicorn. There's no other facility like this. You really should come down though and have a good time because it's fun. But right next to the restaurant next to this facility is another restaurant, Red Roost, which the same owners have. So you have a couple of options. You can hop in a golf cart and they'll take you right up and you use the regular restroom if you'd like to. But they also contract out with licensed temporary toilet situation, so which is also taken away from the facility. It's the furthest away that it can be, from anything that would be affected by it.
Got it. I'm not an expert on anything as it relates to this. I'm just
Understood.
trying to make logic of it. So if there's a restroom on facility, I guess that water is going somewhere, so it would just.
That is on the septic
Got
for
it.
now. But wastewater's coming because we just passed,
Yeah.
hopefully,
Yes, the
passed the bill that
sanitary,
allow the
yes.
sanitary commission that will allow
Yeah.
wastewater.
And I think that's what's most important here is that unfortunately, I need to have a solution. I say now, but I need to figure out something for these people now. But
Do you feel
this
this
is
just a temporary solution?
yes, it's temporary legislation due to the fact that we have actually in our water and sewer plan, Whitehaven, which is where this area is actually a targeted area right there. So once water and sewer is available,
They'll connect.
they will be compelled to connect.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask one last question? So if you feel it's a temporary solution, do you think that there's probably room to develop a much more concise plan from here on out moving forward as to exactly what you want to move into, so you're not placing all your stake within this one temporary option is my question.
So this is the temporary fix. So they had been open, but then, when everything was shut down during COVID, I mean, so many restaurants were dramatically hurt. We lost so many restaurants and eateries due to loopholes through pieces of legislation for not being open concurrent amount of days or annually or things of that nature. And so that's kind of where this kind of fell through the crack. And so, we just want to get them back up and running again because this tiki bar is so unique. A lot of folks from the Western Shore come over by boat and hang out. You're not going to see me on a boat, so, y'all know I can't swim, so, so I will drive there and hang out.
He's the only person that
But-
wears a bathing suit and flip-flops and can't swim.
It's a nice look, but, so, the uniqueness of this and the fact that this drives business to the restaurant there, which is Red Roost, the crab house, so all you can eat crabs, so it helps supplement 75 employees' wages through the summer months. And so, we just want to get this thing up and running and then have them connect, as you said, compelled, which is another great word.
Yeah, you like that?
Yeah, it's a fantastic word. Into the the sewer system when it's made available, which will begin promptly after the passage of the legislation for the sanitary commission.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Delegate Anderton and Madam County Executive. I think Delegate Long asked my question, but just to clarify, you do not consider this a long-term solution in this situation, correct?
I do not, no ma'am.
You don't. So can you explain, okay, so two other questions. It looks like you're trying to include sunset language, but it's not really straightforward. It talks about how this will remain in effect for 2 years after DLS gets some kind of notice at the end of the second year. What does that all mean?
So this should be it should be referring the installation of the septic, not septic, the wastewater system. To
It's
give
just
them
a very
time to
roundabout
connect.
way.
Yeah, so
It makes no reference to that.
We can clean that up.
Yeah, and
That's not a
literally,
problem.
that final paragraph,
Yeah,
it's.
yeah, that can be cleaned up. Yep, absolutely. I see what you're saying.
Oh, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And then really quickly, the other question is around this issue, which probably goes back to Delegate Foley's question about where this water goes. You're talking about, in defining this restaurant without naming it by name, that it's in this remote area and uses gray water. A community sewer system is not available to serve the restaurant. So the issue is not with the well water, it's with the
Right.
sewer piece of it that you were
Right.
talking about. You're asking for this permission in this other bill. We'll get at it. So does it mean to say that because there's no sewer system available?
Correct, it's
Not
not
water, not city
available.
water, but
Right, not
sewer.
water, but so, yeah, and that's coming, but we just need a bridge to get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
So when we say temporary, it's until we're able to tie them in. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So up in my district, there are a couple areas that have similar scenarios, and they rent one of these fancy bathrooms on wheels, I call them. They're like air conditioned.
Yeah, they're nice, man. They have them at the Preakness, they're air conditioned, go in there and cool off and hang out.
Weddings have them and all that, you know.
Yeah.
So are they permitted in Wacomico?
They are permitted, yes, sir. But I think in that aspect, regardless of how, fancy the restroom is, even though those are very nice, I think it's still labeled as a pump and haul method, but if that would make the situation easier, they would be more than welcome, or they would be more than happy to bring that type of restroom in. But it's still that same method because the company's still coming to empty that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because they're self-contained.
Yep.
The water's in one tank and the waste is in another tank. And if the unit just sits, isn't it so that they bring a truck in that pumps out the gray water or wastewater? That's how that system works, right? So it's the same thing that you're talking about.
Correct.
But you can't do that? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think the reason is typically when somebody uses that type of facility, it's in a, I think Comar listed as like a temporary location for like a festival or something like that. This is going to be obviously for a seasonal thing, so they're open from May to September 30th. So it is a smaller chunk of time. It's not an all year round thing. But typically with those, yes, we can use those, but they're typically for something that's labeled as temporary. And this would not necessarily be labeled. We're actually up in the air as to what it's even labeled as, but because it's a seasonal facility, we're going with seasonal at this point.
So
But you are correct. Yes, we could.
So the problem is, that's listed as seasonal, but what's the definition of seasonal?
Correct. And that was one of our hardest things because when you look at the facility, and actually I've actually apologized to you all because in the Senate hearing, I actually had a picture of the restaurant. But it is, sand tiki bar type area, literally food truck without wheels is what this is, so.
And who either authorizes or denies the use of that kind of facility?
So that would be our health department.
And they won't authorize that?
We have a new health officer coming in at this point in time. There were some concerns about two different things, and so that's why we're here in front of you. Just because of the way the Comar reads, it's just a little tricky, so that's why we're here for the bill.
Clarifying the interpretation.
Correct.
Because, I'm not gonna say the name of the restaurant, but there's a couple of locations on the northern shore where they're kind of almost permanent. Because of the same scenario.
Right.
So I'll talk to you offline about that. But it seems like to me that's an easy fix. I don't understand why that's a problem, but
Right.
we'll see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And last question goes to
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me ask this. And Delegate Lehman left, and I was going to address what she asked about the last two paragraphs. And I had something similar in a bill that I had. And so isn't it so that the Department of Legislative Services put this in because you can't, you have to then amend the legislation if certain conditions are met, and you can't, so isn't it so that that's why this language is in here, that it allows the Department of Legislative Services to change the law, essentially, if certain conditions are met? Isn't it so
It
that
is
that's
so.
why that's in there?
It is so.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All righty then. That appears to be it. Thank you very much. That ends the public hearing.
Thank you all for hearing us.
Absolutely. Let's go now to House Bill 1005, Howard County.
So this is a hunting bill, cue the groans, but it's a really short and tiny one. So good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair Stein, my wonderful colleagues on the committee. Thank you for allowing me to present House Bill 1005, which I'm presenting on behalf of Senator Katie Freihester. And it's a Howard County bill. It's supported by the Howard County delegation. And what this bill would do is to amend Howard County's bow hunting regulations by reducing the safety zone from 150 yards to 50 yards for bow hunters, just two categories of bow hunters. Either you hold a deer management permit, which is essentially a crop damage permit, or you are participating in a DNR managed hunt. So the Department of Natural Resources asked for this bill because with development in Howard County, there are increasing chunks of land that you can't hunt. And the deer are smarter than you would imagine, and they congregate there. So up to a third of the land in the county now can't be hunted. And deer have become an incredible problem. We have, according to the state, roughly 50 deer per square mile. The ideal ratio would be 15 per square mile. We have, just in Howard County, about 1,000 vehicle collisions per year. Lyme disease, Howard County is the 12th highest incidence of Lyme disease per 100,000 residents. Having had that myself, I can tell you it's no joke. But the ecological damage is really incredible. There was an opinion piece in the Post for liberal Democrats like myself. Dana Milbank actually wrote this. It said he was getting a gun. I don't know if somebody else saw this. So I pulled it out because it cracked me up. The Nature Conservancy thinks that deer are a bigger threat to forests than climate change. They are doing extraordinary damage to the understory in our forests. There essentially is no understory, which means that oak trees can't grow. We're losing bird species that nest on the forest floor. We're losing an incredible number of plant species, many of which are attract pollinators, so we're losing bees. It's really becoming a very, very serious ecological problem. And I know to farmers, the only good deer is a dead deer, but although we love them in a way, but it's not just a crop damage issue at all. This is really something that affects everyone. So I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 1005. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Delegate. Any questions for the bill sponsor? All right, seeing none, that ends the hearing for House Bill 1005. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Delegate Boyce, House Bill 1139.
given the absence in the room, I feel like this will be a good one, I think. Anyway, good afternoon, Chair and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Regina T. Boyce, here to present HB 1139, Solid Waste Disposal and Diversion and On-Farm Composting and Compost Use. The name should be shorter, and I want to put it out there. We're going to change the name so it shortens up. But anyway, for your information, this is a revised version of last year's bill, HB 1070. So HB 1139 establishes 2 grant programs as a special non-lapsing fund: on-farm composting and composting use, and Maryland Waste Diversion. So the Maryland Waste Diversion Program will provide grants to counties, both programmatic 50% and competitive 25%, to support waste diversion methods and plans. The on-farm composting and compost use program will provide grants 25% to support farmers with implementation and development of on-composting capacity and composting use. The grants will be administered by the Maryland Department of Agriculture and the Maryland Department of Environment. Both programs will be funded by applying a $2 per ton surcharge on statewide solid waste disposal processed by a refuse disposal system. Surcharges exist in 29 states that have landfill tipping fees, specifically Pennsylvania, Ohio, New Jersey, Iowa, Indiana, Minnesota, North Carolina, and Wisconsin have surcharge fees that fund state programs. The average surcharge fee among the 8 mentioned states is $4.82 per ton. Surcharges across the country range from 25 cents per cubic feet of uncompacted waste of tonnage to $13 per ton of waste. Surcharge fees have been established as far back as 1984. So the benefits of implementing this program in Maryland are many. In North Carolina, for instance, almost $1 million in recycling grant funding was awarded to 47 recipients in fiscal year 2019 to 2020, resulting in 45 new jobs created, 8 million additional tons of plastic recycled, and 55,000 tons of organic material diverted from landfills. And in our neighboring state of Pennsylvania, their environmental stewardship fund supports agriculture best management practice and watershed protection efforts in addition to waste reduction projects. HB 1139 has an opt-out provision for the program if a county, to include Baltimore City and the Midshore, set up their own disposal surcharge to fund waste, waste reduction, tailoring the program to specific needs of their county. So it's estimated that 1/3 of the food produced in the world is lost or wasted, equating to about 1.3 billion tons of food waste. Even worse, this means that 1/3 of the resources used for food production were wasted as well. Expanding the infrastructure of composting in the state is critical to address diverting organic waste from landfills and incinerators as we begin to require residents, business, and industry to divert this waste as well. HB 1139 builds on legislation in the state that supports food recovery and composting, but there are few options to fund such measures. It is my belief and the belief of my panel that this funding mechanism for composting is a start in the right direction. Thank you for your time and consideration. I urge a favorable report.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I think my panel is virtual, and then we can come back to.
Do you want to do it that way, take your virtual witnesses, and then have
Yes,
Emily
sir.
go? Okay. Let's see, Brenda Platt?
Yes, hello, dear Chairman, Vice Chair Stein, Chairman Barb, and members of the committee. I'm Brenda Platt with the national nonprofit, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, where I've been working on recycling for more than 30 years, including in Maryland. Let me just highlight briefly 5 reasons to support this bill. First, Maryland is dumping and burning far too much waste, and recycling levels have actually dropped. Secondly, despite progress on legislation, thank you all for that, but funding for recycling and composting is virtually non-existent. There's always money to build a landfill, wastewater treatment facility, or incinerator, but we really need funding for solutions to prevent waste, to encourage reuse and repair, over throwaway items, to help farmers compost on-site or even use compost, and to educate the public on the benefits, and of course, to combat illegal dumping. Third, this is really the time for this investment. There is so much innovation taking place across the country. There's new companies providing reusable foodware service. Their biggest obstacle is financing. We have farmers who want to compost if they were equipped and trained. The fourth point I want to make is this bill is self-funding. It is not an unfunded mandate on the state, but rather an opportunity to grow the capacity of state and local governments to reduce waste. Now, you may hear that the $2 per ton surcharge at disposal sites will hurt taxpayers or businesses. False. This bill rather is going to encourage waste generators to stop producing as much trash. The less trash produced, the lower the solid waste disposal fees, and recycling and composting are cheaper than landfilling and burning, and they sustain more jobs. And number 5, this type of program has been in place for decades in other states, which Delegate Boyce already mentioned, and this would make Maryland a leader among states and a model for others to follow. Let me end by sharing that 14 groups have signed on to our written testimony. And I thank you, Delegate Boyce, for introducing this bill and for the committee for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Sophia Jones.
Thank you. My name is Sophia Jones, also here on behalf of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. I'd like to amplify those 8 states Delegate Boyce listed. They've been using surcharges on disposal to fund waste reduction successfully for decades. We've heard just a snippet of how this mechanism has had concrete positive impacts on their economies and environments. There's more information on those states in the article provided with my written testimony. As Delegate Boyce also mentioned, the range of surcharges in those 8 states comes to an average of $4.82 per ton. So the $2 per ton proposed in this bill is a conservative amount that would still generate over $12 million annually for reinvestment in accessible alternatives to disposal in Maryland. House Bill 1139 has been carefully written, taking the lessons learned from each of the other states and applied to Maryland's unique waste landscape. We've worked with stakeholders to ensure a number of provisions, including that this investment does not rely on appropriations from the general fund and that revenue covers annual administrative costs, that the surcharge will not be applied more than once on the same waste disposed, that there are appropriate limits on what costs may be passed down to waste generators, that counties have the option to opt out of the statewide program to apply this mechanism with more flexibility, and that farmers, businesses, including haulers, community organizations, municipal governments, and more are all eligible to receive funding from at least one of the grant programs. Various Maryland agencies and numerous counties have published goals to reduce methane emissions, protect soil health and water quality, and extend the life of existing landfills. The passage of this bill would establish a program that directly advances those commitments. The $2 per ton surcharge is a nominal investment when compared to the innumerable economic, environmental, and health costs of delaying action. Other states are leading, and we hope that Maryland can forge ahead with them instead of falling behind. Thank you to the committee and to Delegate Boyce for bringing this legislation forward.
Thank you. Next, Benjamin Fischler. You're on mute.
There we go. Okay, start again. Thank you, Vice Chair Stein and the committee members. I'm Ben Fischler, composting lead for the Maryland Sierra Club Zero Waste Team, speaking on behalf of more than 70,000 members and supporters of the Maryland Sierra Club. We strongly support House Bill 1169. Reducing waste and its disposal in landfills and incinerators is one of several key strategies for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and fighting climate change. However, success at diverting waste depends critically on having in place the infrastructure for expanded composting and recycling. It requires investments in infrastructure by local government, farmers, businesses, schools, nonprofits, and other local entities. This bill would generate the resources for these needed investments while discouraging waste disposal. Solid waste surcharges at landfills, incinerators, and transfer stations have been funding recycling and waste reduction programs in 8 states, as well as other local jurisdictions since early in the 1980s. These investments pay for themselves by reducing the amount of waste disposal. Waste diversion investments are critical, and a waste disposal surcharge has proven to be a highly effective way of funding them across the country. The Sierra Club respectfully requests a favorable report on HB 1139. Thank you.
Thank you. Garvey Heiderman? Is Garvey here?
Yeah, I'm here. Here we go. 1 sec. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, my name is Garvey Heiderman. I own the Hobbit Restaurant and Ocean Compost LLC in Ocean City, Maryland. The Hobbit has been run by my family for 46 years, and I've run it by myself for the past decade. Back in 2018, I sorted our waste into compostable and non-compostable bins for 2 weeks. I personally weighed every bag of trash and discovered that just over 50% of our waste in weight was compostable. After that, I started a compost program in Ocean City. Since 2018, the program has been funded partially by donations, but the lion's share has come from me personally. If the proposed bill had already been in place, I would have easily been able to grow our compost program much quicker than I have to date because the funding mechanism would have been in place from the government side. If we don't help food waste producers such as restaurants and grocery stores deal with the food that they are now required to source separate with bills like this, then the intent of the existing food waste ban legislation will stagnate. This bill will help provide the momentum needed to get a critical mass of food waste producers and composters involved in composting. Maryland has always been a leader in the green space, and we are lagging behind in this sector currently. I'm an efficiency guy, and the fact that we don't have the infrastructure in place to capture a high-value renewable resource to help protect our watershed, among other things, is very inefficient. We need to continue to parallel path the infrastructure and the legislation that makes composting part of Maryland's waste management program. From a financial perspective, this bill makes sense because although at face value it appears to simply tack on a surcharge to generate money for diverting food waste, there'll be a significant indirect savings from the space this will save in landfills. In addition, there's revenue on the back end generated from the sale of finished compost if municipalities decide to internally fund these programs. There are numerous examples of municipalities saving tax dollars from starting compost facilities. You may hear this bill will cause increased fees to small businesses like me, but this bill only applies the fee to waste that is not recycled. So if businesses increase their composting and recycling streams, they will not incur additional expense. We need to start shifting our perspective from food waste diversion being something that will always cost additional money to something that will save us money in the long run and become a revenue source. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Daniela Ochoa. Let's see. Christy Bloomer.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your time, Delegate Boyce and committee members. My name is Christy Blummer, and I am the Senior Director of Composting at Compost Crew. We are a public benefit local business that recycles food scraps and composts food scraps and organic waste, and we're headquartered in Rockville, Maryland. We currently recycle food waste from more than 8,000 homes, businesses, and municipalities throughout the DC region. And we support a favorable report for this bill. We partner currently with local farms, multiple in Maryland, to recycle food scraps and make high quality local compost, which enriches soil, supports our local food production, and benefits the environment. We make an organic soil amendment on the farm, which is used instead of relying on inorganic chemical inputs, which are really expensive right now and hard to attain. We create a circular economy for our community, allowing a municipality to grow food and recycle food scraps in this great closed loop solution. A solid waste disposal surcharge is extremely beneficial. Our goal is to build organics recycling infrastructure to support recycling and environmental objectives while benefiting farmers. There is pent-up demand by farmers, a lot of them that we work with, and they've found that it's financially challenging to purchase finished compost, especially high-quality local finished compost. On-farm composting is also really expensive. Systems require site improvements, equipment, trained staff, all of that to run a program successfully. And we're competing right now with the traditional trash industry, and we need to work hard to build a professionally managed, economically viable system. Anything that makes trash more expensive allows us to increase our collection of food waste. This bill would boost demand and infrastructure that would help farmers and healthy soils. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Emily?
All right, good afternoon, members of the committee. I am Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action, here in support of House Bill 1139. This bill is about reducing greenhouse gas emissions in our waste sector. Not only does it help us meet our climate goals, it also is poised to prolong the lifespan of existing landfills by reducing waste. Finally, it also is about getting carbon into the ground, and it does that through compost. Compost is a really effective and efficient soil amendment, and as the Farm Bureau and grain producers testified during the on-farm compost hearing the other week, synthetic fertilizers are increasingly expensive. But unfortunately, it's not just a one-to-one, well, instead of buying synthetic fertilizers, you can just use compost, because they require slightly different equipment to spread it on the fields. And so that's one of the exciting things about this bill, is it's not just about the waste reduction and source reduction grants, the county grants, the competitive grants, but also helping farmers both produce their own compost, but then also acquire the equipment that they need to use that compost. So it truly is an end-to-end bill, and we are here in enthusiastic support and appreciate Delegate Boyce bringing this bill again this year. Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Healy has a question.
I do. Thank you so much, and thank you for this bill. I just wanted to, are you aware that Prince George's County has a composting, a very successful and growing composting program?
Yes, ma'am, and so we've been talking to them throughout the, throughout this process in the interim, and I think that's why we have the opt-out provision.
Gotcha. Okay, that was my question, because
Yes.
I was surprised that the fiscal note didn't even reference to Prince George's County at all, and so I wanted to make sure that that was clear on the record.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Well, there appear to be no further questions. We will go to the one opponent signed up, and that is Pam Casemeyer. Well, that was civil.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Pam Casemeyer, here on behalf of the Maryland-Delaware Solid Waste Association, which, as you know, because I'm here quite a bit, is the private sector solid waste association. And first and foremost, I want to say, our opposition is the surcharge issue. We're going to pass that on. We don't like surcharges, but I think we're also here because we don't see this bill, even if you had surcharges, as accomplishing the goals that are outlined in the bill, for a number of reasons. Because other states have surcharges doesn't mean it's applicable. It's apples and oranges, because every state organizes its waste collection, disposal, management systems different. Maryland is one of the few states where all the municipal waste landfills and things are county-owned and operated. We don't have private facilities here. So the counties already have the ability to increase their tipping fees at their facilities to gain revenue sources to do the things that are in this bill. They don't even need legislation to do it. They can do it county by county, and I know the bill has a county opt-out, but that could already happen. Secondly, many counties don't provide organics collection, so you're not even going to have the product to try to deal with. But the other issue is commercial grade facility, on-farm composting. We supported the other bill that was in earlier this year that dealt with incentivizing on-farm composting. We think that's a great idea. That's not commercial grade. And in fact, some of the proponents of this bill opposed a commercial grade wood waste facility because they didn't want the truck traffic and they didn't want the other. To do broader, more robust organics composting, you're going to have to cite facilities first. I think I've used up my time. I have other arguments in my paper, so thank you, in our written testimony.
Okay, any questions for Pam? Well, I don't see any, so, okay. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 1139. Let's go to House Bill 1119, Dorchester County. Delegate Hutchinson, welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be here. So, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Tom Hutchinson. I'm the chair of the Dorchester County Delegation. Thank you for the opportunity to present House Bill 1119 with amendments. And just to point out, first of all, there's two minor amendments. It's really to narrow the scope of the bill from fur-bearing mammals to include just fox and coyote. We have a pretty disproportionate population of both foxes and coyotes in Dorchester County. I live in Dorchester County. I've owned my property for 20 years, and I have actually witnessed the increase of the fox population, and it's time for it to start to be managed. They become a nuisance to the citizens. We're finding them in our waste bins, digging up plants and gardens. And most recently, really, is the proliferation of coyotes that we're finding in the area. And what is really disconcerting to many of my constituents is that in some cases, people cannot find their cats or their small dogs. And there's no proof of it, but there's an assumption that that may be it. Also, our chicken farmers are obviously very concerned about it. So foxes and coyotes are very territorial. This came at the request of the Dorchester County Council, and it is to be able to, very similar to how foxes are treated in Charles County, and that is to be able to manage the population 365 days a year, 24/7. There's also a letter of support from DNR in the testimony files as well. So the Dorchester County Delegation respectfully asks the committee for a favorable vote on House Bill 1119 with amendments.
All righty. Any questions for Delegate Hutchinson? Seeing none, you're free to go, sir.
Thank you.
So that is the second to last bill. The last bill is House Bill 1140, Delegate Riley, who does not appear to be. She's on her way. She's on her way, okay. So let me just quickly tell you what our schedule is going to be like. We will have to vote on Friday again because there are going to be some bills that that were jointly assigned to us by appropriations. I understand that they are voting on Thursday, perhaps. And the other thing is tomorrow we don't have as many bills, so we'll have more time to do subcommittees and leadership. Friday, we do have like 70 witnesses, but again, we have to vote Friday because of the timing of things. So plan on being here late on Friday. Sorry about that, gang. And Teresa Riley is up. Hopefully she's done signing her autograph to her adoring fans.
Okay, Mr. Chair, is it possible to bring up my panel?
Yeah, please do.
Yep, I have Tony Sprinkle and Steve Prasad and Vicki Rickerman. Here, I'll get over there.
Port of Deposit State Historical Park? I thought it was just Port Deposit.
No, Port of Deposit.
Is it really?
It is.
32 years I thought it was Port Deposit. Okay, well, Teresa, take it away. You've got 4 minutes.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Barve and Vice Chair Stein, he's here today now, and the members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Teresa Riley, representing District 35A, Cecil and Harford Counties, here to introduce HB 1140, Port of Deposit, State Historic Park Included Areas. HB 1140 is an emergency bill that will extend the critical deadline for the transfer of property to the DNR for the creation of a Port of Deposit State Historical Park from sites contained within the property that was transferred to the state of Maryland from the former Bainbridge Naval Training Center. While asking for additional time, HB 1140 still requires the establishment of a Port of Deposit State Historical Park. This bill is supported by 5 of the 6 delegates of the Eastern Shore delegation and the 2 senators. In 2022, the General Assembly passed SB 541, which called for the creation of a partnership park in Port Deposit without allowing time to garner input from the local stakeholders. An amendment also established a stakeholder advisory committee to work with the DNR in preparing a report for the General Assembly. Therefore, the changes included in 1140 to extend the deadline to transfer the property is necessary to allow adequate time to address the concerns and recommendations from the report that DNR submitted, which is in your packet. A little background of the history of this property is necessary to understand the complex issues that need to be addressed before the transfer of the property and the creation of the park to be realized. The property that has been identified as the 120-150 acre parcel to comprise the park lies within the footprint of the Bainbridge Naval Training Center, which was in operation from 1942 through 1976. The state of Maryland regained ownership of the 1,185 acres to create the Bainbridge Development Corporation by legislation in 1999 for the purpose of facilitating and development of the site. Including, so on that site, there is actually including asbestos, lead, pesticides, because it was a unregulated and unlined base landfill. And the buildings that were sprayed, many of the buildings were sprayed with oil and then burned later by firefighter training. They were identified in certain sections of the Bainbridge property, which led to a 10-year effort to secure an MOU with the U.S. Navy for their remediation of this contamination in the level that would allow for rezoned as industrial or commercial. The areas that are under consideration for development at the park are not included in the 2018 MOU and have not been thoroughly tested for soil contamination that might render a difficult to outcome to the zoning clarification for recreational areas where our children will be playing in the dirt and/or residential use. In 2020, MOU with the Navy was restricted most of the land under consideration of the park, excluding the Tome School, to industrial and commercial use only, with the understanding that the Navy has no obligation to remediate to a higher standard, and to date, the Navy has no interest or finances to reach that higher standard.
If you could wrap it up, we'd appreciate it.
So basically, the bill extends the time frame, okay, from 2023 to 2025, because we need more time to do the study for the soil study. Also, it authorized the adversary committee, which I attended every single meeting. The DNR gave the report, and they gave several recommendations. The two, also what it does is it changes the shall, which was in the original bill last year, to a may. And in doing that, it does not jeopardize the fact that Bainbridge can still transfer up to the 150 acres within that time frame. So the bill is pretty simple, and it gives us time to be able to realize whether we can or cannot, if it's physically responsible to do it, and so forth.
Signed up favorable with amendments is Vicky Rinkerman.
Rinkerman. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Barvet, Vice Chair Stein, and members of the committee. My name is Vicky Rinkerman. I'm the town administrator for the town of Port Deposit. Port Deposit is located on the east bank of the Susquehanna River in Cecil County. I'm here representing Mayor Bob Coos and the Port Deposit Council to request a favorable report for House Bill 1140 with the amendments. And they wish me to extend a thank you to Delegate Riley and the members of our delegation for sponsoring this bill. If House Bill 1140 is passed, there will be an opportunity to pause the transfer of up to 150 acres for a state park. This would allow the town to do due diligence and provide more input on the state park proposal. Elected officials want to continue working with the Bainbridge Development Corporation, state and county agencies, and our local partners, which include the Port Deposit Heritage Corporation, Local Historic Area Commission, Lower Susquehanna Heritage Greenway, and our citizens to explore all potential options that would create an area through a master planning process. This area would be open to the public, provide a recreational component, and allow for limited growth with a total commitment to restore and preserve the historic integrity and culture of Snow Hill, which was a free African-American community before and after the Civil War, and the Tome School sites. This could be accomplished through developing public-private partnerships, curatorships, and taking advantage of the Maryland Historic Trust tax credits and restoration grants, the DNR program, open space program, just to name a few. Again, on behalf of the mayor and council, I respectfully ask that you provide a favorable report to House Bill 1140 with amendments, and I have also provided written testimony. Thank you.
Okay, we have a question. Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Delegate Riley. I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. So, all right, so we passed this bill, this Great Outdoors Act last year.
Correct.
This created this park, basically, and it said that the Bainbridge Development Corporation, which is affiliated with the Navy historically, was required shall transfer the property to DNR, to the state, to create a state park. And then there was this DNR study that was done that was called for in the bill. I have the report in front of me, the report on the Port of Deposit State Historical Park. Okay, so I'm good so far, right?
Good so far.
Okay,
Thank you.
and then it has a bunch of recommendations in here, I see. And I see one of them is to push the date back, because the original date was like this summer. And basically, y'all need more time to figure that out. And so you're saying let's push it to, what, is it 2024 or 2025?
2025 now.
2025,
once
okay. And then originally in the bill, the Tome School was taken out of the bill, removed, but did I hear something about amendment?
Yes,
Okay.
so we feel like we came up with a compromise. We're going to add the Tome School back in. So all three areas, Tome School, Snow Hill, and the adjacent wooded area, will all be part of the bill like it was originally. The only thing we're changing is moving the date to 2025 and then keeping it as we changed it to May, because it's very possible at the end of the 2 years, this may or may not happen. Currently, under the different studies we've done, and that was back in 2016, the cost was going to be like $32 million at that point, and that was 2016. So it's going to be millions of dollars to do this,
Okay, so we're allowing the Bainbridge Development Corporation, basically under the bill, we're allowing them to transfer the property on or before June 1, 2025. So what happens if they kind of shuffle their feet, they don't really get around to it, and all of a sudden it's June 2nd, 2025? Now they no longer have the authority, right?
Well, actually, if when you look into it, both of those properties are under the Maryland Historical Trust. So it's pretty safe that they cannot, and they work collaboratively now, because the Bainbridge Corporation is a quasi-state agency currently. So they're working with MSD and also with the Maryland Heritage Trust. So that property, both of those properties are basically safe and secure, and they basically, you're not going to like build it up and, tear everything down unless it's, in collaboration with that group of people.
But like legally, since it's an emergency bill, we passed this, and let's say we hustled it through, right? And the governor signed it next week. Let's say he signed it on March 15th. It's an emergency bill. So under this piece of legislation on March 16th, the Bainbridge Development Corporation could legally sell off this parkland, this potential parkland, to private developers.
Well, their past history has not been that. They've been working diligently to do and carry out the goal that this General Assembly had asked them to do.
But they could do that.
Yeah, I don't, would you like to?
Well, I understand. The Bainbridge Corporation Steve Cassard has signed up informationally, so if you want to ask him.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
Are you
Pass it to
Steve
Tony.
Cassard?
Tony is
Hi,
gonna do it.
my name's Tony Sprinkle. I'm the executive director for the Bainbridge Development
perfect.
Corporation. It's not necessarily as black and white in terms of disposal of the Bainbridge property because there are various stakeholders that are involved. There is currently a preservation easement within the deed of the Bainbridge site that is held over the Tome School, and it is held over the Snow Hill Archaeological Site. When the property transfers to a third party, that deed would be recorded in the land records, and that preservation easement would be held in perpetuity unless the Maryland Historic Trust would decide to remove that easement. So if the BDC were to transfer any property, it would fall under the complete purview of the Historic Trust as a historically preserved campus.
I see what you're saying. So you guys could sell on March 16th or whatever, under my example, you could sell it to a private developer, but they would still be subject to the deed restrictions.
Absolutely. All of the deed restrictions apply for the Tome School and for the Snow Hill Archaeological Site. Now, the wooded conservation area that is outside of that parcel, which is part of the land that falls under that memorandum of agreement with the Navy that has a land use restriction, that currently falls under the direction of our development partner because they have development rights to the property. So we cannot sell land without their approval as well, because they have the development rights to that property.
Okay, and then last question. I know that this looks like a little bit messy on the local level, and I'm trying to wrap my head. This is not my area. I've never been to Port Deposit, I have to admit. So I'm trying to just kind of, I'll change that. Whether we sell it to private developers or not, I'll come. But my question is, so with the amendments, is the Cecil County government, both I guess the county executive and the council, are they still opposed with the amendments?
The county council has never sent any opposition to
Okay.
this bill at all.
Okay.
There were two council members that contacted myself and the senator and suggested these amendments, so which we considered, and they will be part of the bill. So
Okay, so the county executive remains opposed, but the county council is like somehow split. And how many council members are there? Five. Okay, so there's some sort of split in the county council.
3-5.
The executive
Well,
is
actually,
opposed.
they're not opposed to it, but
And then the town of Port Deposit, I saw the municipality, I saw somewhere that like the parks director is like excited about doing the park and doesn't like the bill. Can someone, is that right?
that's county.
That's county, that's the county parks director. Okay, all right, that's all I got. Thank
And
you.
Ms. Rickerman is from the municipality, so they
Oh,
are
I
against.
see, okay.
Yes,
Okay,
so-
Delegate Jacobs has a question.
Can I make one other
No,
comment?
let's let him
Oh,
ask his
sorry, I just
question.
wanted
That's
to
okay.
address what you said.
So, Tony Sprinkle, you're here, your information, you're here to
Answer questions,
right?
yes.
So I've got a couple. First of all, do you like the concept of this bill? I mean, you're the executive director of BDC, right?
So the BDC, our board has not taken a stance for or against the legislation. The Secretary of DNR did add BDC to the advisory committee group for informational purposes only. We've been the steward of the property for 10-plus years. We support the town of Port Deposit and their wishes to continue further due diligence, and we support DNR asking for more time to do due diligence, because ultimately, if there are significant resources or funds needed to create the park, it would not fall on the BDC, it would fall on the state and the county. So we are very supportive of more time if that's what all parties wish, and we're happy to play a role for informational purposes, resources, technical assistance, however we can assist the ultimate goal.
And if this bill doesn't pass, are you worried about the BDC's Phase 2 negotiation?
So there is definitely a delicate relationship between the BDC and the Navy. As Delegate Riley mentioned, it was a rough 10 years of back and forth, and ultimately we came to an agreement on that. We came to an agreement in removing residential and recreational. So if the state would want to renegotiate that, that would put the BDC in a bit of a difficult position, because we are trying to move forward with them on our Phase 2 development under the current requirements and those current restrictions, but then also simultaneously would be then a party to some extent in conversations about renegotiating that agreement and asking for additional land uses. So it does put us in a bit of a jam.
Yeah. Well, you know, I've heard, and including myself, there's concern about, possible contaminants in the ground there and making this a state park. We certainly don't want it to end up like what we see on TV with Camp Lejeune right now, 30 years later, with the problems that you see involved with that. Are you hearing that from anyone in the area that if the possibility of it being a state park, that there's people concerned with the, what may be there? And that kind of leads to why they're asking for more time to really evaluate it.
Mhm.
Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that. So the area was sampled through the targeted brownfields assessment, and it does show contamination in the wooded conservation area. I'm not sure to what level the local community is aware of the legislation and the idea of there becoming a park. The only thing I can comment on in terms of that public perception is when development started, there was a lot of questions about the community wanting to know, is dust in the air an issue? Is runoff an issue? So I think there would be a lot of potential community concern if they knew there was contamination on the site and there was the exploration of a park. But ultimately, the Department of the Environment would have to weigh in on what requirements there would be for investigations, because that land has not been tested to a residential risk assessment, only to a commercial and industrial.
Thank you very much.
I have a question. I heard it said that Bainbridge Development Corporation is quasi-government. What kind of an organization are you?
So the BDC was created via legislation in 1999. So we are an entity of the state, but we are not funded by the state. We were actually created with no funding. They thought it would be a quick transfer of the property. We have a development agreement to which our private developers fund all of the operations for Bainbridge, which varies from planning and property management, environmental compliance, and all of those things. So we're an entity of the state, but we don't have.
Who's on your board?
So we have 9 voting members who are appointed. Well, sorry, 8 are appointed. 2 members represent the state delegation. 4 members represent the county, the Cecil County. 2 members represent the town. And then the Director of Economic Development sits by position. We then have ex officio members, which are the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of DGS, the Secretary, or the Director of the MHT, the Director of Medco, the Mayor of Port Deposit, and the County Executive.
Wow.
It's a 15-member board.
So you get your money from what types of entities?
Our private developer, we have, part of that development agreement is they fund the yearly operations via an operating payment.
Okay. Delegate Terraz has a question, then we'll go to the opponents.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on that issue of the private developer, you have a private developer?
It's an LLC, which has 3 partners.
So is it Bainbridge? It's not.
BDC is the property owner. We were created to solely facilitate the transfer of the property.
So who's the private developer?
MTPM LLC, which is made up by NAI Michael, Mannequin Properties, and H&S Properties.
So it's a single developer that funds you?
It is technically the development partnership that owes the operating costs.
And so they could purchase the property?
They technically have the purchase rights to the property.
Okay.
The property has been paid for, so they could take title to the land.
So then it would be in the hands of the private developer and not BDC?
It depends what portion you are talking about. The development team has no rights or authority over the Tome School or the Snow Hill Archaeological Site, but they do have the rights to the wooded conservation area.
That's the difficulty of this.
Okay, thank you.
It's confusing.
So let's go to the opponents. Let's go to the county executive first, and let's give her 4 minutes. Madam County Executive, and there you are. You're muted. Danielle, you're muted.
Okay.
There you go. We can hear you now. 4 minutes.
Right, okay. Good afternoon, Chair Barbe, Vice Chair Stein.
Could you speak closer to your microphone?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better.
My apologies for the close-up, Mr. DeMille. Good afternoon, Chair Barbe, Vice Chair Stein, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Danielle Hornberger. I serve as the Cecil County Executive and am here today to request an unfavorable report on HB 1140. Last year, the Maryland General Assembly passed the Great Maryland Outdoors Act, which created a state and county partnership outdoor park located in Port Deposit, as you know. Thank you. Since that bill was codified into law, I have served on an advisory committee comprised of representative voices for all of the natural key stakeholders, including the County Council, Town of Port Deposit, Cecil County Parks and Rec, DNR, Commerce, Planning, Superintendent of Cecil County Public Schools, our local chapter of the NAACP, the Cecil County Delegation to the General Assembly, and others. We anticipate working in a collaborative manner towards funding and planning this project. The goal of this advisory committee is to determine what is feasible and best for this wonderful partnership between the state and the county, and I, among others, am certainly committed to doing just that. If HB 1140 were to pass, changing a may into shall, the state park could and most likely would revert back to the care of a quasi-government organization responsible for the development of the much larger and adjacent part of this parcel, the Bainbridge Naval Base. That organization, as we have spoke of, is the BDC. Their goals are to clean up and develop the land adjacent to this state park. In 2022, after 20-plus years, the first phase was accomplished. Likely the largest economic development project in the county at $250 million and almost 4 million square feet of commercial activity, logistics. That was phase 1 for the BDC, and phase 2 is quickly approaching. There is no phase 3 plan for this parcel. Let me repeat, there is no phase 3. The remaining land contains steep slopes or is associated with the historic Tome School Forest Conservation and Riparian Buffer and the national landmark, the Snow Hill Antebellum Free Slave Archaeological Site dedicated to African American slaves, which has been all but ignored until recently and is an important part of this new park. Desperately needs the attention afforded by the law you passed last year, and with the advisory committee of local and state stakeholders will receive the attention it deserves. Additionally, this land is in the Chesapeake Bay Critical Zone. For these reasons, the General Assembly directed this acreage as the basis for the Port of Deposit State Park. Passage of HB 1140 will grant the Bainbridge Development Corporation members the ability to sell off these sacred sites to developers. The bottom line is there is a state park. There is funding in the governor's budget for the first steps, including testing. There is a cast of appropriate stakeholders organized and ready to work on figuring out the next steps and best use. And as we all know, there are many variations of what a park can be and how it can be utilized. The current law allows for a group of stakeholders to work together for the common good of Cecil County residents as well as all Marylanders. As county executive, I'm making a statement that our open space is important. We have invested millions of dollars in open space for our residents to enjoy quality of life and to support economic growth in our county, attracting high-paying jobs and quality businesses. We look forward to continuing this effort. For all these reasons, I oppose HB 1140 and plead you issue an unfavorable report for this misguided bill. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Madam County Executive. Let's turn now to Clyde Van Dyke, who is listed as being with the Cecil County government. So, Mr. Van Dyke, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, but start by telling us what your role is in the Cecil County government.
Sure. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Clyde Van Dyke, and I am the Director of Cecil County Parks and Recreation, a 26-year veteran in the field. Today, I'm speaking in opposition of HB 1140. I have 8 quick remarks to make. As written, the current verbiage of may instead of shall implies the site will not become a park. Furthermore, the phrase, if the BDC transfers the property, insinuates the site will not become a park as previously passed in SB 541. Deadlines such as the June 2023 conveyance motivates action instead of continued complacency and ambiguity. Foregoing all semantics, this property has sat dormant for decades only to entertain vandals and arsonists. I'm not sure what value another year or two of ruminating will yield. By not conveying the property to DNR in June of 23, as written in the original bill, only enables further decay of this historical resource. If the state finds the historical significance of the Tome School and Snow Hill landmarks do not warrant an investment, they should vote favorable on this bill. As a Parks and Recreation professional, I feel the historic significance of this site affords more than just a monetary investment. Simply stated, deadlines and funding are action motivators. Without them, stakeholders will never devise a plan of action to preserve this historical landmark. With this, I request an unfavorable report, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Before we go to questions, it occurs to me that I failed to call up Philip Hager from the DNR, who is signed up informationally. So let's give Mr. Hager a 2-minute time slot here. And then also, Steve Cassard, are you, Mr. Cassard, you want to speak for 2 minutes also? No? Okay. Go ahead, Phil.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this opportunity to provide feedback on this bill. My name is Phil Hager. I'm the Assistant Secretary at the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. As was stated, this matter was created through a last-minute amendment to last year's Great Maryland Outdoors Act. The amendment requires that DNR take over the Bainbridge property in June. DNR has no plans in the works for this property. We had no intention last year of making this part of our parks inventory. As you know, park development is difficult and challenging, and it takes a lot of time. It's even more so difficult in this particular case because there's been no advanced planning. The contamination extents are unknown. There's a lack of infrastructure in the area. The funding for creating this park is not currently available. And I do want to stress that this property is not now currently part of the park inventory. There's been some discussion that's labeling this as a park. It is not. The report that was done last year recommended more study. We understand there may also be some further amendments to be discussed. The best decisions and the best plans are the ones that result from deliberation and thorough research. We have the opportunity to do that in this particular case. I encourage us to do so, and I look forward to working with you and other stakeholders as we move forward with the further disposition and discussion of this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll entertain questions for the county executive and for Mr. Van Dyke. Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the county executive, isn't it true that today was your birthday?
It is. In fact, I was going to ask for an unfavorable finding just for my birthday, but I keep it professional.
Thank you so much, and good to see you, County Exec. Can you or the Recs and Parks officials speak to Maryland Historical Trust? They have a letter here, and it's all a bit confusing, but it goes back to talking about the property and what would have to happen should the property be transferred as it relates to not losing, not only losing the site, but able to losing the potential work done thus far on the site.
I'm not sure I can speak to it.
Okay.
Sorry, Delegate Boyce, just not knowing exactly what is in that, that letter or that testimony. But what I will say is, as I said earlier, I think I may have said, you know, been thinking about this for a while, and hashing it over what I'm going to say. But, this has been in the care of the BDC for 20-plus years. And, you know, while they have been stewards of the property and have finally seen some development there, my question is, what more can they do that they haven't done? It's been 20-plus years. And I know you were asking earlier, I believe Chair Barve, who exactly is on the BDC, what is the BDC comprised of? And one of my points would be that the advisory committee is comprised of the key stakeholders, including MHT, to be a part of this, including the town, including all those stakeholders that truly make sense and should be key stakeholders to make something happen finally. It hasn't happened in 20-plus years under the care of the BDC. There's $150,000 in the governor's budget. I think that's a great first step.
Thank you.
I have a question. Madam Exec, what do you want to have happen with the land? And what do you, in the alternative, what are you afraid might happen?
Yeah, so what I would love to see happen is that all of these key stakeholders come together and we figure out what, first of all, step by step, what can happen, and then what is best for that land. I don't want to, you know, me being one individual, one resident of Cecil County, say I want a motocross, you know, site there. That's not the case. I want to truly take everyone's input and what makes sense, and it could be anything from a variation of conservation and a walking park to something where we see, you know, a revenue generator, if you will. I know Clyde can probably speak a little bit to that as well. Being in Parks and Rec for decades, I don't want to age you here, Clyde, but you know, definitely want to see the key stakeholders be a part of that. And what I'm afraid could happen is that it reverts back to the BDC, and the BDC either it gets sold off to developers and we pave paradise and put up a parking lot. You know, we can't get the land back. Or B, it just languishes longer and longer for 2 more decades, and we see more vandalism and arson.
Well, let me follow up and ask you this. The proponents of this bill have argued that the existing agreements bind any property owner in the future as to how the property should be handled. Are you aware of this, or does that not give you adequate comfort? I mean, this is what they've said, and so I want you to be able to respond to that.
Yeah, it doesn't give me adequate comfort because while there may be some carve-outs, the reality is it could still be sold and developed. So no one has denied that. And in addition to that, you know, okay, so then what are they going to do? If that's their statement, then what are they going to do with it? I'm not hearing anything better than what we have, is my argument. We've had a group that's been holding this property for 20-plus years, is developing parcels to it, has key interests with developers. And No one on the advisory committee, to my knowledge, has that kind of interest with developers. Our interest is for the residents of Cecil County and the residents of Maryland. So those are my concerns and my thoughts.
Okay. Are there any other questions? If not, thank you very much, one and all. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 1140. It also ends the public hearings for tonight. Before I ask the subcommittee chairs to give us announcements, I just want to, since everybody's here, I want to reiterate the schedule is going to be this. We're going to vote on Friday. We apparently only have 37 witnesses on Friday, which is great. And the reason we have to vote on Friday to a certain extent is because we've got some bills that are jointly assigned with us and appropriations, and that's when they're going to get the bills over to us to vote on them. And so this should give us plenty of time to have our subcommittees do work. And with that, let me recognize Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Housing and Real Property will meet virtually at 5:15.
Okay. Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Environment Subcommittee will meet virtually at 5:15.
Okay. Delegate Stewart.
Mr. Chairman, I have the ENT moment in history.
Oh, the ET moment in history.
Colleagues, it has been 46 years since one of our colleagues on the committee showed beef for the first time at the Maryland State Fair. And that year, he actually won the Herdsman Trophy for the best kept and most informative stall at the fair. So if everyone can give a round of applause to Delegate Charles Otto.
Hey!
All right.
Especially wild turkey. Okay, we're adjourned. How many of these do you have?
Yes, sir. Where are we meeting? Virtually. Oh, okay.
You can either sit there or go to the office.
All right.
You can get a libation at your office, I imagine.